OK，since we're in， 我应该有开麦克风吧？对，OK， 好。该怎么说呢 ？Test，knock，感觉这个时间点看直播的人应该蛮少的吧？一来，说实话你也不是很喜欢在夜间看夜间发射，毕竟就那个火箭在高空的那个轨迹看的不是很清楚。那我们现在有，等一下，现在下面是 NASA 的直播，跟他声音。他现在他刚刚在介绍那个猎户座飞船的那个一些结构，然后我这边把主视图拉大一点。
Inside the service module, you have tanks for things like the thermal control system, potable water when we have a crew on board, and also pressurized oxygen and nitrogen for an atmosphere, which gets fed through this umbilical here. The crew module, along with electrical line, that's also what's going to separate us at the very end of the mission. So that's Orion. It's going to be making its first flight around the moon on Artemis 1. Can't wait to see it, taking those selfies around our lunar neighbor, send it back over to you, Megan.
Thanks, Dan. That last component Dan talked about, the European Service Module, provided by the European Space Agency. Let's go to Jasmine for that.
Thank you, Megan. We are back in Fire Room 2 of the Launch Control Center, and joining us now is Philippe Delou, ESA's Program Manager for the Orion European Service Module. You have quite the title there, a big title for a big job, I'm sure. We are very glad to have you here, and we understand that the European Service Module is powering Orion that's going to send humanity farther than ever before. Philippe, how is it getting us there?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So, yes, the service module accommodates the propulsion system that contains among the tanks and pressurization of the system.
居然还有人嘛！边做小黄去开会，场地边看，哇，辛苦了。这样子用手机看应该是蛮痛苦的。好啦，今天的 NASA 推火箭测试用平台，会是又推回去呢，造成大火球呢，还是真的飞到月球去呢？那作为一个对航天器有不对，作为一个对航天跟太空探索有兴趣的前航天器迷，当然是希望它能入轨啦。至于把月球变成火球，我们可以考虑一下需要多少当量的核弹才能够把月球变成那样子。目前根据其他人的 update 看起来是说，整个准备的流程难以置信的顺利，应该是这样子。他们好像又遇到了氢气泄漏，以及那个上面有一个遮盖物脱落的问题，然后 你之前就有在那个推特上看到一个消息说，如果这东西因为被台风吹一下就会掉下来，那它要怎么扛过 MaxQ？ 等一下，之前说什么补给阀泄漏，然后现在是又发生了。
inside ESA's control room in the Netherlands. So can you tell us what is
这
your
把声音
team
好小
working on today?
其实我这边是并不太到推的平衡之类的东西吧，至少好。目前的说法是，刚刚是说补给阀泄漏，然后去抢修，修好了之后，不是追踪 SLS 的雷达好像出问题，可是那不是发射场的基础建设吗？是吧？他这边说了什么？Ethernet problem， 不是吧？这个真的是被诅咒。不过现在核心段已经灌满液氢液氧了，所以其实整个核心级是最大的变数。它如果灌满了，上面级应该问题不大。它就是一个那个。它应该就是那个半人马，上面级的小白，突然想到，原本要说的是那个 IL10 的，IL10是那个半人马上面级的那个独立引擎，可是那个 SLS 装了2颗。再来就是。
Right, we're going back to the moon and farther even beyond. Thank you so much, Philip.
说实话，他的准备时间真的有点太长，这个现在要突然把自己拉回这个状态，需要一点时间，一点点。
Leah, how are things over there?
Things are good over here at Johnson Space
所
Center,
以
which
液
is
氢缺口
just
已经解
one
决
part
了
of an agency-wide
目
effort
前
with
需要等
many
待的
NASA
是雷达
programs
这边的
doing
修
their
复，
part to
但
make future
是
missions a reality.
他们的表示是说需要50分钟左右去修复雷达的传输，然后
entry spacesuit called the Orion Crew Survival System.
我
When
们
they
的
set
Red
foot
Team
on
在
the
哪
moon,
呢？
will be
万
in
能的 Red
another
Team，
all-new
难
next-gen
以置
suit,
信的顺
both
利，里
being
面还有
developed
一直
at the
说，
Johnson Space
其
Center and
实
through partnerships with
该怎么
commercial
说呢？
providers. During those spacewalks,
对
astronauts
于
will collect samples
那
for
个
further
任
study
何
of the
的
moon.
载人
The
航天任务
Astromaterials
来
Research
说，
and Exploration Science Division at JSC is
任何
preparing to
形式的
receive
delay
rocks,
都是正常
soil,
的。
and ice collected
像
from the moon's
那
south pole,
个
which has a
美
unique
国
crater
跟
impact
苏联
history
冷战
and
早
ice
期在
deposits that
评
have
第一
never been
个
sampled.
飞
And
越
leading
球
the
的卫
effort
星的
to
时
advance
候，他们就
capabilities for
是
science
就算是
exploration
那
and commercial
个
development of
基
the
本
moon
上
is
预
the
算没有
Commercial
上限，
Lunar
然
Payload Services
后
Initiative, or
火箭
CuSP.
随便打的
More
时
than
候
a
他
dozen
们都
American companies are developing science
拖
investigations
了一段
and
时
tech
间，然后射了
demos.
4次才
Additionally,
成
we
功
need a
的摸到
sustainable
月球的边
presence,
边。
a specific
所以对
station
这
in
种东西
orbit
来说，
to facilitate
对啊，你要知道
continuous
很多人
lunar
都是说
access and serve as a
到底
home
会
base
炸还是不
or
会
a
炸，
jumping
就是
off
快
point
点
for
快点
new
给我们一个
deep
答
space
案。
exploration
可是
missions. This is where
对于
the
整
gateway
个
comes in. It's a multi-purpose lunar space
航天相
station
关的
being
从业人
developed
员
by
来
a
说，这种事情真
worldwide
的就是
effort
办案不得。
led out of JSC. NASA is again teaming up with international
所以
and
Everyday
commercial
Astronaut 那
partners to
边就
create this
是
essential component.
上面级加
Artemis
速中，
and
然后
Gateway
疯
will
狂的冒泡
enable
泡。
NASA's human
然
research
后
program to better understand how
我知道
human
他想要
body
让直
adapts
播看
beyond
起
low Earth
来
orbit,
生
ensuring
动一点
future
吧，但
astronauts
是
traveling
就
to the moon and Mars have the tools
这些
to
东
keep
西
healthy and thrive in new
出于
environments.
SLS
And
拖了
with
这么
that,
久的
we're
原
going to
因，
turn it
相
back
信应
over to
该
Megan
很
and
多
Kayla
人
at
都已
Kennedy.
经不需要
Thank
做
you so
功课
much.
了。
So Artemis will also facilitate new discoveries about the moon.
目前
So
是
to tell us
T
what we're
minus
hoping to learn, we have Sarah
25
Noble here. She's the Artemis
梦轮
Lunar
还在进
Science
行中，
Lead.
所
Great
以
to have you here.
问题应该是不大
So。tell us about what we know about the moon.
其实有关 Artemis 1的筹载，在10月份，上次发射的时候是10月份嘛？不对，好像是9月的时候。9月的时候，那我已经讲了差不多了。那欧空局做的服务舱跟那个 Orion， 还有剩下的舰艇那些制造商跟发动机那些东西，大概都已经过一遍了。所以它的本质上真的很像是从货架上找出一些冷战时期的东西拼出来的东西。对啦，很多人都会说那个只是把一堆已经很成熟的产品拼在一起，到底有什么难的？因为其实系统整合本身也是一项非常艰巨的挑战。我们看一下那个 Everyday Astronaut 那边的画面好了。
And there's places
那
there
边
that
有
are
一个
permanently shadowed,
有趣的细
where
节
we
可以
think that
观
water
察
and
一下
other。molecules
哇，我们可以
sort
去
of
找月
get
球上面长
trapped.
怎么样，
We
那个
really want to
那种事
understand
情
what
等
those are, and so that we
我们
can
实地把人
use it
送
for
上
both
去看看那
science
边长
and
怎么样
for
再
as a
说。
resource.
Sarah, we're also planning to land a
先把
rover at the
Everyday
south
Astronaut
pole of
这
the
边
moon in
的
late 2024.
片
Can
子
you tell us about that?
拉
Yeah,
大，
absolutely. The Viper rover, the volatile
就是
investigating polar
应
exploration
该是看得
rover,
到嘛，就是
is
这
going to
边
go
有
land
一
near the South Pole,
个
and it's
可以
actually going
看
to
到
explore
的
some of these
是
permanently shadowed areas. It's going to dip
啊，
into
就
them,
把视角
drill
切走。
down, try to find out what that
那现在我
water
们刚好
is,
可以
what else
过
is
一下
there, what form
SLS。
that water is, how much
其
is
实你现在
there,
比
so
较
that
担
we
心
can
的是
really
固推
understand
哦，
it
就
both from a
是
science perspective
它
and if we want
的
to
固
use it
推
as
用
a
的是
resource, we will
APCP 或者
understand
是
how to extract it.
So some people might
APHTPB
say, you know, we
的这
have
种
all
燃
these
料，它
rovers,
是
we
有
have
存放
access
时限的。
to machines that
就
can do a lot of the work
当
on
然
the
理论
surface
上
of
他
the
们真的
moon
很
for
耐
us. So
放，
why
但
is it
是
important
真的
to
不知道放了这么
return
久会不会出
humans
事。
to the moon?
Yeah, it's
然后
not
刚刚
an
你们
either
要
or
讲的其实
proposition,
是
right?
那
There are some
个
things that robots are better at, and some things that humans are better at. And
整
it turns out
个
that humans are much better
连
field
接火箭
geologists,
的
who
脐
really
带
much
管
more efficient
它
and
脱
better
落的
at that.
方式，
Plus,
因为它的
we
火
can
箭发射的时候要把它
better
断开嘛。
deploy more complicated instruments.
那
And
那
we
些
can
断
use
开
tools
基
in
本
ways
上
that it's very difficult for
有
robots to do, so we can collect better samples. And one of the great things is that we can bring back a lot of
有
samples.
3道
When we do
程
robotic
序，
sample
然后
return,
彼
it's
此都
usually a very
是
small
互为
amount.
备
But
份，
if
可
you
以
look at
让
what we
让
brought back
让个
from
插销顺
Apollo,
利的断
it's a
开。
large amount of samples that literally hundreds,
详细的话，
probably
大家可以
maybe
去看那
thousands of
个
scientists have been able
窦
to
先生
study
的
over
纠
the
缠
years
态
and，over generations.
这
And
边应
that's
该
a
有
lot
人
of
知
brain
道吧？
power to
那
put
个
behind those
那个
samples.
窦先生的
Then
纠
that's
缠态，
how
他们讲过
Artemis
那
and
个
Apollo are
那
different. Now we're
个
utilizing
火箭的
machines
加速
and
脐带的
people
部分，
to hopefully
它
advance.
是用一
Yeah.
个
Perfect. Sarah,
类
thank you so much
似
for your time.
Thanks for having me.
求
So in
索的方
honor
式
of our
固定的。
destination, the
那
moon, we
在
asked
快
you
速
all to
断开
create
的时候呢，
moon-inspired
它是
content
把这
and
个
share
卡
them
扣
with us
解锁，
using the
然后利
hashtag
用
#NASAMoonSnap.
加速管道的
We've
内
got
部压
so
力，
many wonderful
把
submissions,
那
so why don't
个
we
栓
check
锁
them out
自
now?
己把那个插销头自己挤出来，然后那个插销头的解锁方式，基本上是用管线旁边的另外一个气压去推，就是在管线里面加入气体，用气压的力量去把那个锁头断开。那如果那条管线出了问题的话，旁边有一个机械结构，其实就是我们在 Artemis 1上面可以看那个刚刚那个上面的视角的加速脐带上面可以看到有一条钢缆，那条钢缆就是备份用的机械断开装置。然后如果那个机械装置也出问题的话，火箭在升空的时候会把整个东西往上扯。把它拉紧
That was
之
a
后
really cool，
它一样
look
会自己
at
断开。
all the different kinds of creations, recipes, and also art, and it was great to see what people submitted.
Yeah,
这
it's
应该
awesome
是
to
真
see
的
the
没问题
creativity out there and
了
how
吧
people are engaging with this mission in
说
so
实
many
话，
different
看
ways.
火箭发射可以
So
看得这
I
么
know
像，
that you didn't
应该
submit
说
it yet,
现
but
代
you did
的
create a
航
moon
天
snap,
科
so
技
to
已经
so
是
to
足
say.
够
So
成
why
熟
don't
了，
we
所
take a
以
look at
绝
that
大部分的
picture?
发射我
Yeah,
们都
it's
是
one of my favorite
它的
pictures
T
of the moon
minus
that I
到
was able
zero
to
的时候就
take
应该
from
发射。
orbit. I think for me, it kind of reminds
极
me of
少
that
数会
iconic
延误的原因，
picture
大部分
of
都是因为什么
moonrise
发
or
射
earthrise from the
天候
moon
不
from
符合
Apollo.
预期
And it's kind
啦
of，that
或者
reverse. I think
是
there's something about
一些
seeing the moon from orbit around
非
the
常小
Earth
的
that
细节，
makes it
所以对
seem
SLS
a
来
little
说
bit，easier to imagine what it'd be
只能
like
说它
to
真的是
have
被诅
that
咒的
view
火
from the
箭吧。
moon looking back at our home planet.
Yeah, you should definitely submit that because that's an amazing photo. Did you take that yourself?
Yeah, out of the cupola window
Wow.
for the space station.
Wow, the
Yeah.
resolution's great.
把
The cameras we have up there are
把
incredible. It's
这
awesome.
个
So I
东西
haven't taken a moon snap, so I had nothing to submit. So how do you feel about creating a moon snap with me?
Let's do
这
it.
个玩
All
意
right,
儿
well,
拉
take
大，
that if you don't
然后
mind
切回
lifting
上
it
面那个
up.
脐带
And
管
we're
的时
just
候，
gonna snap a photo here. Oh, lighting. Perfect. So I just created a moon snap. I love it. I'm going to share it. And again, this is just to encourage people to really get involved in this mission. So we will continue to collect and share those photos. So again, if you have a NASA moon snap, just use that hashtag. Okay, Artemis 1 comes
哎，
amid
有
a
了有了
very
有了，哎，
busy
等一
year.
下把那边切回来了。
So hopefully that makes things better for launch, and
就
hopefully they
在
get that fixed.
边，你
And
可
we
以
see an awesome rocket
到。
launch tonight. I cannot wait. All right.
可以看到，
matching. Okay, so
这个
from
脐带管上面，
this is in regards, I think,
这
to
边
why are they launching at this
它
time?
上面
And,
有一
yeah,
些
a lot
钢
of
缆
it. This
那
is
这
a
些
good
钢缆
point.
就
They're
是
matching the moon
辅助快速
orbit
状态用
to
的
a
这些
specific
东西。
window. The moon needs
它原
to
本是
be
用那
at the
个
ascending or descending node in its orbit.
管道
yes,
用那
there's
个
the
气动的方
inclination,
式
the orbital
把
inclination
插
you need
销
to hit.
推出去解
There's
锁。
all sorts of
那
things,
那个插
especially
销
for
因为是
being
推出
elliptic
去嘛，它是
orbit.
一个机械的
They
运
need to
作，
launch
所以也可以用
Orion into the
钢
elliptic
来
orbit
办
that
到。
makes sense.
啊，如果
that
真的
it
不行的话，就
helps it
靠
get
火
out
箭
to
自己
the
去把它
moon
扯
instead
断
of。fighting it. Because actually, if you launch an ellipse in the wrong way, like 180
然后再来就
degrees
是
from
很
the
多人
moon,
都会
it
吐
would
槽
take
说，
more energy
这个东西怎
to
么看起来
get
这么
to
像
the
洋葱？
moon. So they want to use
我
the
说它真的
elliptical
蛮像
transfer
洋葱的，
orbit
而且它其
basically
实
of
有
the
点
core
感觉
stage
算是违
do as
背
much
了
work for that upper stage as possible.
美国载人火箭的祖宗之法，就是他们喜欢把载人太空舱外露，像从那个水星计划到双子星计划，还有阿波罗计划，他们的整个那个指挥舱可能还有服务舱，阿波罗是指挥舱跟服务舱都在外面，双子星双子星跟水星不太确定，但是他们的基本上他们的那个载人舱的部分都会露在那个整流罩的外面，但是就直接不管它，直接让它在上整个铺露在上面，只把喷嘴部分的机关围起来而已。但是 Artemis 它就是用一个全罩式的整流罩把它整个罩起来了，就很。感觉就是祖宗之法不可变，但是他们就改了这样子。其实运载火箭是非常重要的东西，我们就算做了再多的那探索太平用的这些东西，没有运载火箭，这些东西也没有用武之地啊。
We will see a monster, just absolute beast, fly and leave the pad. That makes it all worth it. All the blood, sweat, and tears, and travel, and the investment in trying to bring this to you guys as best I can. It's all. I really hope it's going to happen tonight. This is going to be the big one to see. And I've been waiting for this launch since I saw Orion fly in 2014. And the time in 2014, SLS was hopefully going to be 2 or 3 years away. Obviously, we know it took 8 years from that point to get to this point. But this is what I've wanted to see for a long time. This is frankly, until I watched Starship development in person and kind of fell in love with those belly flop tests, this was the only thing that I cared to see fly. Was
对这些，FBS 呢，刚才说的东西是目前靠唯一想看到飞起来的东西。确实啊，现在要说超大型火箭真的有希望发射的，就是 SLS 还有那个 Starship， 他们两个是目前最接近发射状态的大型火箭。这个应该是后续 Artemis 计划相关的东西。其实大部分都蛮熟悉的，因为真的是很常被这些东西轰炸。
We're going back to the moon. We are Artemis.
水星应该也是外露了，还有弹射座椅可以做，对啊。太空梭也有弹射座椅，只是后来出于人道需求就没有做。还是比较希望它在白天发射。你看你们的封面，原本预定的时间是在白天，所以背景是蓝的，蓝天，然后现在。为什么是交响乐啊？OK， 我们切回 KSC 的视角。糟糕，我知道那是 Space Center， 可是每次都会把它讲成那个 Kerbal Space Center。之前让 Rocket Lab 打的轨道验证是说 Capstone 吧，那也是第一次有地方卫星跑到那么远的地方，是蛮厉害的。地方卫星其实你也很不喜欢地方卫星，就对，3000，对，你还知道3000，但是 一味的把这些东西小型化是不现实的，因为人类终究是要走出地球，所以只为了发射这些小的东西出去，感觉让他们当探路者是有意义，但是这也只有让人类成为多星球物种才有它的意义在。所以你还是比较喜欢大的探测器，像火星车或者是那个 CuSP 好像也快要发射了。想说去木星。去外行星的探测器，像 Cassini、Galileo， 然后 Voyager、Pioneer， 那些探测器其实都蛮大的。不过他们是算是犯规，因为他们用了一大堆那个 Gravity Assist。像那个去冥王星的星地平线号，还是对星地平线号，其实就相对来说没有很大。一度激动无效的不得不提到日本的准鸟号，那个真的就是靠着控制团队的努力，让半残的卫星一路顶回地球。
You know, it's just it gives me a sense of pride, really, to just remember that our country continues to lead our nation in space
嘴归嘴啦，但是
and as such,
应该其实不太敢想象，当这个东西发射的时候，自己会有多激动。
Earlier this year, Vice President Kamala Harris came down to Kennedy Space Center and met with NASA leadership as well as astronauts. She also toured our facilities where teams are working on hardware for future Artemis missions. Before leaving,
Ricky
she
says,
signed a
so
piece
for
of
crewed
the
launches, when will the astronauts board Orion? Before fuel load, at T-minus 8 hours, or sometime after fuel load? I'm pretty sure. I would love to be updated on this. If anybody knows in Discord for sure, I don't recall off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that that they will load astronauts after the vehicle's fully fueled and in a safe fuel state.
Like
it is right now. The vehicle is fully fueled.
对之后的 Artemis 的载人任务来说
the upper stage is okay. The upper stage is not completely.
太空人不在加注前，还是加注
the rest of the vehicle is in a safe,
登上那个
propellant loading, and they're doing the.
我们应该在加注中的时候让他们上去，让他们体验一下温暖的电热的氢气烧起来的火焰。看一下，其实，在任务设计的状况来说，它整个加注的时间其实非常的长。那如果要提前把太空人塞进去的话，它里面的那个 EQUULEUS 就需要提前开机，那它对整个任务的程度是不利的。而且，这也违反人道主义。如果先让太空人在里面窝8个小时左右的话，就是在 human factor 的方面他们会希望说能够让太空人在任务的过程中尽可能保持一个精神上的安定状态。那如果在里面先再加入前就让太空人蹲进去的话，那真的是基本上所有的载人任务都是在燃料加注完成的时候才会把太空人放进去。
That's what Saturn V did. You know, they approach the vehicle when it's fully fueled. And again, SpaceX actually has some pushback to the load and go idea. They were like, "Wait, you want to?"
所以 ArgoMoon 也喜欢那个中鸟号的任务。你要是有看过一本叫那个《现代萌卫星图鉴》，它是日本的书，然后不知道为什么台湾就代理人。就没有，其实有点蛮讶异的，就是说这种看起来不能盈利的书，居然有人代理，然后翻成中文。它有出2人，但是不知道什么时候会有中文版。里面就有提到准鸟号，然后那个画是画的准鸟号超级可爱的。蛮有趣的一点，发现 Everyday Astronaut 这边用的那个灯号是绿色，然后我这边那个可能滤镜设置的关系，那个绿色就被裁掉了，所以那几个按钮现在是透明的。然后是发射场外围的景象。
That feeds into liquid hydrogen core stage tank. That's been resolved. The leak has been fixed, and we're moving forward. Currently,
现在 T- 卡在10分钟了，
liquid hydrogen is roughly
然后它就卡住了。
at the moment.
Let me explain a little better. Our clock is showing you when it's going to launch. NASA's clock is showing you the planned hold coming up, which is actually no, that makes sense. It's the planned hold now for 30 minutes, and depending on the status of the range,
还有准鸟2号，没有记错的话，你要在那个6不对7对，那个8月的时候有去台北天文馆一趟，然后那时候他们在放的片子有一个是那个触摸星空，在讲的是 NASA 作为探测器，像那个卡西尼、帕克，然后还有什么来着？老公，你们只记得这2个，卡西尼跟帕克。然后另外一个就是那个准鸟2号的影片，做的也不错，他在讲那个准鸟2号跟龙宫的故事。然后你还是想吐槽，虽然这里可能会演上，但你还是要讲。你还真的很不喜欢台北天文馆现在的那个探测展，以前那些东西好多了，就不知道为什么现在天文馆的那个长测展就变得非常的，感觉像是让幼稚园或小1、小2的小朋友在假期的时候让父母带回去他们看的，可能他们觉得做再好来也都是一些小朋友用走马看花来看嘛。这样要怎么提起公众对那个航太的兴趣啊？
Oh my gosh. Okay. Actually, here, Andrew, why don't you pull up the computer here quick? I'm gonna read from our pre-launch preview live on air. This is everydayastronaut.com. Click on upcoming launches, and you'll see our pre-launch preview for this particular mission. We do have, again, when we get into this is the terminal count here. This is what types of things go on. There's the ground launch sequence, T-minus 6 minutes. GLS, go for course. Go for core stages, all these things. There's a whole list of things that will happen in those 10 minutes. A lot of things.
T-minus 6 seconds. 必须得说，刚才因为 NASA 的画面突然闪过一个娱乐太空衣的 Artemis 的那个太空衣，然后第一眼把它看成 Yuri Gagarin。
Getting real close. If they shut those down, unfortunately, my understanding, I don't know this for sure, and I still don't think I've heard the answer. I'm pretty sure if they do light the RS-25s, I think it would have to go back.
所以说，为什么雷达数据的 Ethernet 会取回来这时候坏掉啊？
And those engines light, and it does not lift off tonight. We will see you guys again in like January, unfortunately. So we're really, really hoping they get through that and they light those solid rocket boosters, and this thing lifts off in 38 minutes from now. Oh my word! All right, but here, let's get to the launch timeline. What we can expect here.
那目前的说法是，那个 Ethernet switch 已经换了一个能用的上去，但是还是必须要进行测试，所以还是不知道能不能在这边的11:04分，就是可能台湾那边是下午2:04，目前还不知道能不能在那个时候发射。
So when the rocket boosters let go, they're not just the peak altitude isn't 45. They just let go
突然想到一件事情，他们为什么不盖2个雷达，然后在2个雷达上面放4个交换机？
Or lower, they might cross the Kármán line, the arbitrary Kármán line. They may or may not get higher than 45 kilometers.
进入计划中的30分钟到府站。所以现在就是。
3 minutes and 19 seconds to launch. Abort tower is jettisoned.
我在这边等30分钟，然后现在有一个问题就是，应该很少人有空，而且没有话题可以，没有人开话题聊的话，这30分钟你们要怎么度过呢？开坎巴拉嘛，那个 Mars Horizon 上次已经试过了。
8 minutes and 16 seconds. That's a long engine burn.
要是今天飞不了测试的窗口是1月，就算是好了，到1月份的，如果这次发射不了，1月的时候感觉还是会有事情。说实话，这个我已经习惯了。大的任务。It's been a long time. I don't believe this thing will actually fly today, fellas. Hey, my current comrade. Well, I don't see. It's well, thanks for coming. I know I should like
it'll be
do
going
a
on a highly elliptical orbit. At the point before that,
period
the core stage will still be burning
stream
up
schedule,
because
but
it's very low
as
altitude,
a
it will re-enter the atmosphere
power
and burn
engineer
up the
that
solar
is currently
So,
suffering for about
that's where they raise
5
the
projects,
the
it's
energy
like
burn. That's about a,
actually it's
what
messing
is
my
that,
life,
20-second
but
burn.
as an
Then
engineer,
they do the translunar injection
I'm
burn is
glad
it's like
and I
18
feel
minutes, if I recall.
proud of myself for
18
messing my
minutes.
life on contributing
18
to
minute
the
long
industry projects,
rocket engine burn from that RL-10
and
on the upper
but
stage.
that do
That's gonna be
impact
impressive.
my
So that's what we can expect
relaxed time.
tonight,
So
my friends.
so I
it's getting
cannot
close.
do like live
T-minus
stream
33
very
minutes.
frequently.
Again, we're expecting an update
because
here from Mission Control here in the next
like I know I'm
about 20
relaxing
minutes,
while live
15 to 20
streaming, but it
minutes.
still
We'll expect to hear
takes
from Mission Control. Maybe
I still need to
hopefully
use
the
my
Go
brain.
Logo poll on air,
use
but
my
I don't know
chip
if- I don't know if
to
we will.
to
So far, we
think
have not heard,
while I was
in the
I was
comms
gaming.
the right things
So
on the feed, so we will see. All right, this is from
平均正常来说，倒数到多点就不会停止倒数。这个要看，不过基本上进入最后的那个发动机启动程序的时候，就现代火箭的话，它的液体火箭发动机是有一个紧急关闭的选项的，所以说之前就是有火箭它在发射前出问题，就紧急在发动机点火的前一个停机，所以这不太好说。理论上到发射前1秒，如果他们检测到那个出问题，然后那个涡轮泵还没有转起来的话，他们都可以，或者是说。刚才说，涡轮泵如果还没有开始转起来，然后固态还没有点火的话，他们可以随时把它暂停掉。那如果涡轮泵已经转起来的话，他们一样可以把它暂停掉。因为，但是问题就在于整个发动机已经进入那个预运转的模式了，所以说，如果是涡轮泵开始涡轮泵启动之后。不能说涡轮泵，可以对，因为燃气发生器循环的液体火箭发动机，它的涡轮泵跟燃气发生器是在一起的，所以可以算成，大概算成同一个运动部件。然后，如果这东西已经转起来了，他们就需要推回去对发动机进行检修，或者是更换。那如果那2根大固推已经点火，基本上就。他们无论如何都得让它飞上去，因为固推就熄不了火了。大概是这样。对，安科 boy 说的没有错。太好了，是不是太想用了？就是感觉有点，就你还是觉得那个土星5号用的那个红色的发射架比较好看。他们应该把这个发射架涂成红色的，也可以涂成粉红色的。现在是他们会停在这个T-10 的时候，大概半小时左右，虽然已经过了一段时间。
But I mean, producing something in 4K is very difficult. We're using absolutely every tool at our disposal to try to bring you guys the highest quality we can. This is the thing I gotta always ask. How many of you are watching this in 4K? How many of you are on hey, Andrew's watching in 4K.
oh yeah.
So how many of you out there are watching in 4K? Do you have a 4K TV or a 4K monitor or 4K device? And are you watching in 4K? Obviously, I think Personally, I think it's worth it. These days, it's hard to buy a TV that's not in 4K. You know, most streaming services, built-in apps and stuff like that are able to do 4K.
目前确定，Jeffrey 发了一条推特说，那个他 entered into the T-10 minute hold for Artemis 1 launch. Currently evaluating the remaining work, including re-verifying the replacement Ethernet switch with a range. Will establish a new launch time shortly. 所以意思就是说，他们会发布一个新的发射时间。他们发布了这个新的时间，总不可能比原本的大定时间早吧？所以他们是现在也要 就算是几分钟，你要让他演就是了。
Their space shuttle, the Braun that launched on Energia, yeah.
不过为什么是推特？现在不是说有什么推特逃难潮之类的。
Another time, so twice. That still is an awesome system, and in the grand scheme of things, if they had been able to play that out more and get into Energia 2 and all that stuff, they would have had flyback boosters. All 4 of the boosters on Energia would have flown back to the launch pad. It would have just been so cool. So. Okay, let's keep going. This is from Christoph. I wonder in comparison how many times Apollo missions got delayed for comparison. I'm sure that data's out there.
那为什么 NEA Scout 那边的影像也跳一跳？I wonder in comparison how many times Apollo mission got delayed?
I mean, frankly, this technically has only had 2 launch attempts. I'm going to be pretty impressed, frankly, if they are able to get this thing off the ground on only the 3rd launch attempt, because that's still, in the grand scheme of things, that's not much. There's been, SpaceX launches and launches from every launch provider in the world that have had more than 3 launch attempts for a rocket, and there's always a variety of reasons. So you just never know. And I would be curious to see the data on that. But like I said, there's a lot of new parts, there's a lot of new things, and things are just at a much bigger scale. And whenever you scale things up, you just never know. All right. Oh, this is from Marcus the Goat. Oh, this is the stuff I love to hear. I want to be an aerospace
发射服务的提供商来说，一款新型火箭，这只是它的第3次发射尝试而已。任何一款新型火箭的发射尝试通常都会比这个高。那会比例的原因是因为 RMS 实在是，应该说 SLS 这个东西实在是太庞大了，这样子。
It's just been amazing to
SLS 的这个
be able to do this for
第
you
一集的
guys.
屁股，它看起来真的很像 Vulcan 哎。
I'm here. It's all because of you guys.
他们真的不考虑在前面装一个充气热盾把这个东西回收吗？那毕竟是4颗 R15啊，毕竟是4颗啊。
My parents to get excited about this. I want my friends and my niece and nephews and my sister and her husband. I want everyone that I know to fall in love with spaceflight, because I do think it's the future. It brings hope. It brings, it helps you really get,
一个这东西搁了经济机是成功还在组装时，BAB 能被龙卷风造访。等一下，对的，那一次是火灾吧？那次是火灾吧？那一次应该是火灾，不是龙卷风。然后它过在外面的时候是飓风，然后 SLS 能承受的最大风速是136，结果那个飓风141，他们就真的。We choose not to go back to BAB.
It's bigger than any one of us. That's what I love.
So,
no
it says I don't believe this time will actually fly today.
Brilliant people, insane amounts of teamwork, and some of the brightest minds in the universe.
Use your hope. You need to have hope.
To put all this stuff together and make it happen.
怎么感觉像那个侠盗1号的屁股
？Hope. Catch the bug, and when you catch the bug, there's kind of no.
SRB 点火就没有救了，对啊。
I love it. I love it. I'm glad you guys are here.
日系火箭哦。
Jamie
别提了，你的安加系列呢？还有叶尼塞河。
That's honestly crazy. I have had
就算不造叶尼塞好了，把那个切洛梅的 UR700系列抓回来，或者是。 或者是，把能源号弄回来也可以啊。现在日系火箭基本上都剩下直子跟联盟，还有一些相对来说规模比较小的火箭，就是一口气掉在那边。你要是真的希望看到那个。 如果 UR700系列火箭能够飞起来的话，一定很壮观。它就是一个堆叠式模组化的火箭。这只是它一个计划中的一个小分支而已。而且看起来那个已经有了非常悠久的历史的联盟号和 R7应该还要被继续使用下去。
I love that you guys are here. This is
$500多美了。对啊，现在抽大型火箭可能真的只能指望那个大雪。
I love you guys. Gary became a member. Thank you so much.
没有办法，因为那个战争的关系，很多原本可以推进的国际合作都被迫停掉了。对于那个人类共同谋求的太空探索来说，真的是一件很 令人伤心的事情。
We should just get a streamer or like a space tube get together at some point and just do something fun, and all hang out at some point and at least hop on a stream together or something. I think that'd be super fun. Why does the core stage have Star Wars Rebels?
真的是像日本的 H3， 日本的 H3 已经在准备发射的路上了。然后 Vulcan 感觉也快要出来了，毕竟第一次发动机都交出去了。新可能需要一段时间，但是你还相信就他们 Bezos 天天在的迟早也会憋出来的。然后 Starship， 当时我们还在开玩笑说，到底是那个 Starship 是那个 Starship 先入轨呢，还是那个 SLS 先入轨呢？我看起来当时有一个阴谋论说 ，FAA 会故意用航平卡那个 SpaceX， 直到他们先确定那个 SLS 入轨。当然这比较像阴谋论，因为如果这是属实的话 ，SLS 真的快点上去。然后对 Ariane 6 Ariane 6也快要被发射，就日本、美国跟欧洲的新一代运载火箭都在路上。然后我们的安加拉呢？安加拉5真的是你们非常喜欢的一支火箭，还有联盟2，对联盟2，虽然联盟2就。对你来说，它的性能指标比较好，但是对你来说，它有一个其中一个型号是没有侧面那4根 boost， 那4根1级半构型的助推的，就没有那4根的 R7 就不是 R7 了，联盟就不是联盟。对啊，不止联盟6，还有那个 H3 啊，长征9。对了，你觉得长征9降落，它在正式开始制造之前还会改过几次设计？如果没有记错的话，它现在变成那种并排小颗粒发动机的方案。
Isn't necessarily like it's not like the most historically important launch yet, but it sets the pace and the momentum and pushes us into the Artemis program properly.
对，科洛不只是那4根，那4根是联盟号的灵魂。应该说那是你的大型火箭里面最喜欢的2种构型，一种是像 Delta 4，还有Delta 4 Heavy， 还有 Falcon Heavy 那样子的 CBC 构型，就是在星级两边各充当2个一模一样的星级。然后另外一个就是中间一根主要的星级，然后旁边绑4根助推，那4根助推其实是固推还是液推都无所谓，所以不只是 R7， 像那个长征5号其实你也很喜欢。就蛮漂亮，就是那4根 booster 打开的样子真的是很漂亮。然后 Delta 2也蛮漂亮，它周围绑了9根固推的那一台。比较有趣的是，它6根固推是在地面先点火，之后3根在上面，还在上面点火。它围那么一小圈也蛮好看的。然后 FS5 就不行，它是好火箭，但是你还是比较喜欢丢它。而且 LS5 就RD180引擎也很喜欢，有能源号的血统，但是就如果是这样子的话，为什么把能源号回炉重造？还有 RD191也亮，有一个项目是用 RD191发射。9个 SRB， 如果这不是砍掉太空计划，我们不是绑钢筋就可以解决的事情。9个 SRB 的话，就需要考虑整个火箭舰体去承立的部分，因为它火箭它的星级能够把那个助推器去承受压力的部分，大部分最能承受压力的地方就是火箭底部引擎跟燃料槽衔接的部分，顶部的机烟段，还有中间那个2个不同燃料槽之间的隔板那个区域，这3个部分是最理想的在侧面挂上去的挂点。 那如果助推的或者说绑在侧面的东西，它的规格达不到的话，某个程度有几个方案。第一个是加延伸段，所以有时候我们会看到那种火箭有一种贴着旁边的那个4个助推，它前面的整流罩是贴着火箭的侧壁往上延伸的，像长征5号还有长7号应该也是这样子的构型。那它的目的其实就是把火箭助推的前面延伸到那个燃料舱隔板的地方去做挂接的动作。那另外一个部分是直接加厚那个助推器接触的燃料罐子附近的蒙厚度，这是另外一个方案。
There's ebbs and flows. It's like there's a lot more tension, but because there's a lot more tension, there's also a lot more people trying to do the same thing. So just differentiating your portfolio, showing that you have the ability to do things on your own accord, and bootstrapping yourself. Saying like, hey, I know I haven't been credentialed yet, but I actually flew down to Florida. I stayed for a week. I got these images from a public location, from the beach. I tracked it like this, or, et cetera, et cetera. I think those are the ways to get your foot in the door. Is frankly just to have a portfolio.
就我跟那个 SRB， 对，我们刚刚话题说嘛，对，那个如何在，就你可以看到说，就是这两个 SRB 的高度就要接近那个液氢槽跟液氧槽的分界线。至于9根的 SRB， 其实你也很喜欢那个 Mars One， 就是2015年发射的那个星座计划其中一个产物，用1根的 SRB 当起飞值真的是很帅，而且就如果在省钱的路上，你会觉得可回收的液态火箭当第一级，跟纯固推当第一级都是2种不同的省钱方式，因为这个固推需要回收的部分其实不多嘛。我们可以把固推当消耗品来找。
Seeing you and your crew evolve over the years puts a smile on my face. Keep it up. Thank you so much, Ash. That really means a lot to me. I'm just so fortunate that we're in this place, that we are here today. Hopefully about 17 minutes away from seeing an incredible mission.
因为这个时间真的是蛮尴尬的啦。现在是礼拜星期3的下午。
There might be a slight delay. They are still not out of the hold, so we're going to hopefully hear about the go/no go status.
快要2点，这个时候应该大部分的时间都在。
There's a very good chance that they say we're good to go for 1:14.
也不是每个人都可以每次，ArgoMoon说要发射就飞到 Florida 去看。
Things are looking good. For a nearly
然后
on time
SpaceX 那边
launch,
是不是
SpaceX
那个 NASA 的直播是在回顾 Apollo program， 可以切回去一下。
Your procedures and how you're going to deal with issues that come up, because they will come up. They always come up.
Exactly. And you have that experience as a test pilot, but also as a former astronaut. In that video, we saw you getting your induction into the Astronaut Hall of Fame, which is pretty cool. So what is your perspective, or what advice do you have for the Artemis astronauts, those ones that are going to maybe set foot on the moon?
9根的 SRB 真的
They don't need my advice. I'd love to elbow them out of the way.
好像不是不行。
They are
因为9根的 SRB 应该就要单独捆绑起来，然后直接当成那个第一级了。
Jessica Watkins, who just came back.
到底什么样的载荷会需要这个东西？这样子的助推啊。
And I think they're really excited that we're putting science front and center in the Artemis program too. We're going to learn so much about the solar system from the moon, and even about the Earth. And so I think the astronauts are really excited about doing that hands-on science, and they are ready to go.
Right, I know they're ready to go, and maybe you are as well. But Artemis 1 is just the beginning. Then we have Artemis 2 and on. We're learning so much. What do you think about this just forward movement that we're making right now?
Well, it's really important. This is the Artemis campaign is actually part of a multi-decade effort that we're doing right now, which is really with the goal of creating a blueprint for how we're going to explore with humans and do science throughout the solar system. So we're going to learn through the Artemis campaign on the moon, and then we're going to go demonstrate it on Mars, And then the next destination, who knows where.
Right. I mean, we're going so much further than we ever have before. Pam Elroy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Go Artemis.
Of course. Go Artemis. Megan,
Artemis.
back to you.
Please.
Thank you both for that interview. Now, teams over at NASA's Johnson Space Center are also monitoring today's launch attempt. So why don't we go back over there with Leah to tell us what's going on over there.
Thanks, Megan. And you're right, teams here in Mission Control Houston continue to monitor today's events. Again, they will really kick into action once we have liftoff, and they'll remain on console all the way through splashdown. But quickly, I have to show you something, a little show and tell. It makes me feel like the coolest kid. In school, I've got a moon rock here. I hope you can get a good shot of it. It is from Apollo 15, 1971. And when it was brought back to Earth, it was part of a larger rock. In total, it was 21 pounds. This is, of course, a smaller section of that. But we're looking forward to the Artemis program and being able to go back to the moon so that we can continue to gather these kinds of samples. But this time at the lunar South Pole. We've never been there, and we've never brought samples back from that area. So we're really excited to see what might differ in those samples and the ones that we have here. Now, of course, we've got a whole laboratory of scientists that are able to study all of those samples. We just opened some up for the first time earlier this year so that we're able to test with new technology everything that we can learn about these samples that we brought back now 50 years ago. So hopefully within the next few years we're bringing some new ones back to use that same experimental process on and tell us a little bit more about the moon. But just had to show this off. Apollo 15 moon rock. We're looking forward to having some Artemis ones here at Johnson Space Center. And with that, I will send it back to you at KSC.
You were a cool kid before you even had the moon rock, so. But now you're even a cooler kid. Now the name Artemis was chosen because in Greek mythology she's the twin sister of Apollo. NASA's Leo Martin is over at the nearby Kennedy Space Center visitor complex where thousands have gathered to watch today's launch attempt.
Hi, Megan. I'm actually joined here tonight by a very special group of guests here from Stennis visiting Kennedy Space Center. Why don't you tell me, Ryan, what it is that ties you to tonight's launch?
So we were lucky and privileged enough to be able to test the core stage of the SLS rocket that's going to launch today. We got to Green Run, which is a full duration hot fire. It's a very historic time for us at Stennis. It was so exciting to be a part of. It was 7 years of hard work by a lot of really great people.
And Jack, sorry.
Just so excited to be here to see it.
And Jack, you were actually telling me that you know firsthand, how much work has gone into tonight's launch. What does it feel like to be here tonight, seeing the rocket fully integrated on the pad, ready to go?
Man, I'm just incredibly grateful to be a part of this history and just really excited to see this thing launch.
And Barry, you were telling me that you know also firsthand, the adversity that these teams have overcome to be here tonight. Do you have a word of encouragement, anything that you'd like to say to the teams all across the United States right now, both at Kennedy and at JSC, who are just sitting in these seats ready to get the rocket launched tonight?
Sure, persevere. I mean, it's hard work, but it's so well worth it. We spent many hours doing testing and trying to get ready for this moment, and I think we've forwarded that information to those guys, and we also give them the encouragement to continue on so we know they can do it.
Thanks so much, Barry, and I think it would be great if just on the count of three we can give them a great big go Artemis. 1, 2, 3, go! Back to you, Megan.
That was amazing. That's just, people who were actually able to come here to Florida. There's many people who are joining us from around the world who couldn't obviously make the trip out here. So let's take a look at some of those watch parties there. Here's Space Center Houston. It's the visitor center over for Johnson Space Center in Houston. And you can see a lot of people there after hours because you know that visitor center is closed right now. People are waiting. I love it. Wow, whatever that is.
去搞 human space flight 去测试那个 human factor 那些工程师需要去负责的，所以就SRB让第一题真的是一个很酷的想法，感觉它是让火箭变便宜的另外一个思路这样子。而且Miles真的蛮帅的，就头出脚细。看起来别有一种特色。
And there's the Space and Rocket Center, where we have a ton of people cheering us on tonight for this incredible launch this evening.
I love that. They totally
换句话说就是2:04分发射无望，吗？不对，2:04分。对，应该是会延，可是会延几分钟还是延？
Marshall Space Flight Center there is super instrumental in
还是延好几天就不知道了。
the Artemis program is doing. They contributed a lot to the mission, so it's nice to see everyone there. And then here is Airbus in Bremen, Germany. So Airbus is the main contractor for the European Space Agency, and together the company and ESA, they provided the European Service Module, which is an important part of the Orion spacecraft. So we have
现在是标准时间。
more reasonable time over there in Germany. It is 7 a.m. So I'm going to say Guten Morgen to them. Did I say it right? Guten Morgen to them over there in Bremen, Germany. Again, the Airbus company. All right, so let's get another check on the launch team with our Daryl Nail, who's inside there and has an update for us.
Yeah, that's right, Megan. So we are clearly in a delay now. The NASA test director, who's basically flying the ship for the launch countdown tonight, has said that we are
我现在真的是很难自己一个人撑话题，因为在乎的几乎是工程上的东西。没有记错的话，上次那个 Lex 大大开了直播，都在谈 Artemis 的文化象征，说什么我们要从那个 Apollo era 进到那个 Artemis era， 就是我们从阿波罗世代的人变成了 Artemis 世代的人。你的文学底子比较糟糕，所以不是很清楚要怎么聊这些东西。而且一个东西，它要变成潮流文化之前，首先它应该要是一个脚踏实地的技术才行。这只是个人想法而已，拜托不要吵，不要演上，拜托，你应该没有说错话吧？
Of course, cryogenic tanking, a complex operation that has seen some delays tonight. We had a roughly hour delay after a replenish valve on the core stage liquid hydrogen side required hands-on work by a red crew team that went out to the launch pad and tightened down some bolts on the valve and got it fixed before leaving the launch pad, and then launch team verifying that work was complete. Now currently we're awaiting some work with the range. The 45th Space Wing, which oversees the range here, and makes sure that the airspace and the ocean
液氧液氢是加满的状态，我们可以看到它在不停的泄露的原因，不停的有那个气体在冒出来的原因是，现在是那个度假模式，然后。
there's testing that must happen with the flight termination system that was delayed by a bad Ethernet switch. Switch has been changed out, and now the range is looking to start testing their connectivity to the rocket in order to preserve that safety function that they are responsible for. So again, we are slipping now indefinitely into the launch window. We're awaiting the launch team to evaluate just how much time is required to complete the work to get this rocket ready to launch. And of course, when we have a new T0 for you, we'll report that out right away. Megan, back to you.
Daryl, thank you so much. As NASA prepares to explore the moon, here's a look at the spacesuits and tools that will help us to do that.
Watching Apollo footage of astronauts doing geology on the surface of the moon is a really great way to think about preparing for Artemis, for putting people on the lunar surface once again. We learn a lot in how they did science operations on the moon and what it's like to work on the moon. You see them doing geology, you see them taking rock samples, putting in a drive tube to take a core sample, you see them bouncing along the surface of the moon on the lunar rover that they used in Apollo 15 through 17. So it's a great way to help drive technology development for the next generation of spacesuits and geology sampling tools.
There's these facilities that help us train like we are on the lunar surface. these 1.6G offload systems or putting people in the aquatic environment are great ways to train the mobility part, right? Like what can you do and how different does it feel to be in 1.6G and do these tasks?
1000年前8九问今天，1000年后你确定和平。
Astronauts had literally hundreds of hours of training in geology before they flew to the moon. It's often said that the Apollo astronauts had the equivalent of a master's degree in geology by the time they flew to the moon. In the intervening decades since Apollo, we've been training astronauts who fly to the International Space Station because when they're on the ISS, they spend time observing the Earth, looking out the window, taking pictures of what they see on the Earth's surface. Now that we're looking at putting astronauts on the surface of the moon, we also take them into the field. We take them to field sites here on Earth that resemble field sites that we expect them to see on the moon.
That's the reason why we take them out into places that are unique, like volcanic landscapes or places that are analogous to the lunar surface, to train them on the scale and fidelity of science that you just can't recreate in these facilities.
And so by combining this classroom and field training, we're able to prep them for fundamentals of geology, the major driving lunar science questions that we have that we hope to address with the Artemis program, and teaching them how to do field work in relevant analog environments.
For just science aspects of developing new spacesuits, can it get you to where you need to go? And then once you get there, can you do the cool science that you need to do? And so that's, can you move effectively and efficiently in the suit to be able to collect the samples or use the tools or the instruments? For the visibility, it's like, can you make the necessary observations that you need to? Or does the suit have the lights on it that it needs to illuminate the surface and make the observations you need to? The lunar South Pole holds
Upper
tremendous
stage
resources
liquid
that are
hydrogen
gonna allow
is
us
now
to
in topic.
continue
The
to
range safety
explore.
officer is
This
setting
a
the
place
flight
that we've never been
termination
before. There's so
system.
much to be
The launch
learned
team
from
is
getting boots on the
determining
ground and
our new
exploring
launch
a
time.
unique place
哎
that challenges us
哎，
as humans
原来
and also
啊
helps us develop
那句话说的
technologies
是
that make our
说的
everyday
是
life that much better.
We think there might be volatiles
现在
present
对
at
对
South
对对，
Pole.
这个
Using
刚刚
these
其实
volatiles,
这是
we'll be able
一
to
个
do
比较晚的
things
消
like
息，现在推进剂已经满
drinking
了，
water,
他们现在是在
create
排
launch
查
astronauts back
雷达的
to
问
Earth.
题
And so by，
然后那
harnessing the
个
power of
flight
the
termination
land, we'll be
system
able
确
to
实
help
是一个
astronauts establish
需要
that
test 的东西，
long-term
但是目
sustainable
前主要
presence.
就是要修复的东西还是对那个 Ethernet， 还是对 Ethernet 换过 Ethernet 的那个雷达去做遥测雷达去做测
Human
试。
nature to explore, pushing our boundaries and exploring our universe is, I think, just one of those things that's just stuck in our human
然
nature.
后
And we need to
四
do
方
it
真的
in
好
order to
多
understand the world
那
around
个
us, including Earth and
新
the
时
solar
代
system.
新衣装。Ted 这边先透露一下，美俄的新
We just heard
衣
there
装跟
how curiosity
新衣装确实是有在
with that
进
in
行
mind,
中，
why
只
don't we do some
是
social questions? 'Cause some
橘
people are
色，
very
其实也
curious
一直
to
在
hear what
想
you have，to
就
say
到
about
底
their
要不
questions.
要
So
装
why don't we
太多
pull
的
up the
橘
first
色，
question
因
here?
为对，橘色很醒目，它也是那
What are
个
your thoughts
那个舱内作业服的很常见的颜色，像是那个 Space Shuttle， 还有当然最有名的就是 Yuri Gagarin 那件，还有 Artemis 他们的舱内服也都是长这个样子。但是说实话，平常穿整件橘色的工作服，看起来会让自己看起来很像 ARC 的工作人员之类的。
Our crew executed over 350 different scientific experiments during our 6-month mission. And so when you think about that, it's years of work to get one of these payloads or an experiment on the space station. And sometimes that's someone's life's work you're holding in your hands and executing. And so being prepared for those moments is really important, and understanding how to bring the team from the ground into solving complex problems. We take that really, really seriously. And of course, we want to share what that experience is like. Only a few people have been able to go to space. And as we commercialize space, as low Earth orbit becomes more accessible, that'll change. But still, it's only available to some of us. So we really want to share what that's like and the perspective we gain from our time up there.
It's really great to see and hear that you guys acknowledge that, right? Like that this experiment that you're holding, that you're working on for 6 months, somebody has been working on literally for years. I mean, I've talked to some scientists and they're saying, oh, this has been my life's work, 20 years of my life's work. So yeah, that was a really good question. I like that question a lot. Okay, we have another one from social media here. Astro Kayla, have you considered what you might say if you had the opportunity to be the first female to set foot on the moon's surface?
No, I have not considered that. If I was in that role, it's something I would take really seriously. I think the iconic words of Neil Armstrong, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind,
你说的是
something that we all know, whether
叮
you
咚
witnessed
一
that
级
moment
舵
or
面
not,
错
or
误
it happened
的
before you were born for like
泰的你有点 lag， 那个不是 ARC， 那个不是 ARC， 那个舵面，
Yeah, that would be in the
你说那个两节式，然后因为遇到风切，稳定维翼受损，导致整个火箭被气动力撕开的那个不是 ARC， 那是很大的团队。虽然那之后讲一下啊，你也很不喜欢在那边说什么。
That's an awesome question that I wish I could
Wait,
answer.
why is
Megan
space?
and I were actually talking about that earlier.
他又说到一个问题是说，为什么这东西是橘色的？那橘色其实就是那个燃料罐那个保温泡沫涂成的原始色彩。那要说这个橘色是什么东西，就可以一路追溯到太空梭的那个大成罐了。
I'm gonna have to take a phone a friend on that one, I think, to know the real answer.
那是大团队，但是你还是很该怎么说呢？不高兴。那个有很多媒体说什么发射成功，就你要这个火箭的发射成功，至少要等到有效载荷分离才能叫发射成功，而不是离开发射台就要成功。而且就。 该怎么说呢？就诚实的说，遇到风切导致数据出现这样子有很难吗？还是说就是为了流量去不择手段？还是说，而且也没有看到一些社群媒体做，甚至是那个 NSPO 去做辟谣的动作。 你可以说，如果你真的想要把成功两个成功两个字塞进去的话，至少说部分成功嘛。像哪怕是 ARC 之前那一根燃料没有加满的，也可以说是类卫星啊，你可以说类成功嘛。直接说发射成功是真的有一点点，就。 航天不是这样子搞的。那当然，那只是对外的媒体形象啊，就至少主要工程师他们还能够去正视发射舱遇到的错误，然后想办法去解决它，而不是掩盖它。就像如果 SLS 把所有的试彩都能做好的话，就还是有机会，还是有希望的。那一次砍星7组控制，核子太空组 ARC， 不对 ，TED 可以。砍星的世界线，你随便贴一个旗子上去都可以吧？不一定要贴 ARC 啊，可以贴米的 Nearest Space Enterprise。
You've been hearing throughout the broadcast all the different science that returning to the moon will enable us to do. So there's actually something called the Prime 1 mining experiment, and that's going to robotically look for ice and other resources below the lunar surface.
盯着那个
NASA's first polar resources ice mining experiment, also
还是
known
在
as Prime
补
1,
加这样子。
will robotically look for ice and other resources below the lunar surface. Thanks to data from spacecraft orbiting the moon, scientists believe that the polar regions contain water ice in the form of ice just below the surface. With the right technologies, that ice is a game-changing resource that can be mined and used to produce propellant and breathable oxygen for future explorers. Under NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services Initiative, the agency selected intuitive machines to fly and land Prime 1 on the moon's south pole. Prime 1 will land near the Shackleton crater to drill into the lunar soil in an area that could contain water ice. Prime 1 is made up of two instruments, Trident, the regolith and ice drill for exploring new terrain, and M-SOLO, the mass spectrometer observing lunar operations. Trident will drill up to 3 feet into the lunar surface, extract lunar soil, and bring it up to the surface. Trident drills to its maximum depth in multiple phases, stopping at different increments. As it reaches each desired depth, it will pause and retract the drill string to deposit lunar soil on the surface for analysis. This is where M-SOLO comes in. M-SOLO is a commercial off-the-shelf mass spectrometer modified for spaceflight. It will evaluate the chemical elements and compounds released from the lunar soil for water and other chemical compounds. Trident will then proceed to the next specified depth and repeat the process until samples at all desired depths have been analyzed for water. If no ice is found where Prime 1 lands, NASA will still collect valuable information about drilling into the lunar soil for a future mission. NASA's Viper, the Volatiles Investigating Polar Exploration rover, will use Prime 1 technology on a mobile robot that will navigate the Moon's south pole, searching for additional resources. Prime 1 data will help NASA assess lunar resources to inform future Artemis missions and a robust human presence on the Moon.
So we are still awaiting a new T0 for today's launch attempt, but for more on what to expect when we launch for this first day, let's go to NASA's Dan Hewitt. He's inside our Apollo Saturn V Center at the KSC Visitor Complex.
Hey, thanks, Megan. Everybody, welcome back to the moon board. There's a lot of people here in the complex. I just heard a woo-hoo. People are getting in and out because we have a great view of launch when it's going to happen, and it's going to happen today. But that launch is just the first step in the Artemis 1 mission. So let's look at what's ahead for this historic first flight. As we just said, launch is step number 1. Those 4 RS-25 engines throttle up, followed shortly after by the 2 solid rockets.
有时候载荷入轨还能算成功。说的是我们现在说的是之前那个去海发射场陈大说的那一个。你真的要说的话，有时候载荷入轨，台湾目前还没有那个能够入轨的足以入轨的运载火箭啊，所以只能说认证了道理吧。
We're also going to see the launch abort system come off the top. Once you get high enough in the atmosphere, it's no longer required. You could actually do aborts using engines on Orion and its service module. I will also note that on the launch abort system, it's got those 3 solid rocket motors. The jettison motor is active. The abort and the attitude ones are not for this flight. We don't have people, so we're not flying a fully active abort system. We also have 3 fairings that are there to protect Orion, the service module and the crew module, as we're flying up through the really dense parts of the Earth's atmosphere. Next up, we'll hit core stage separation. So we've got 4 main engines. We'll hear MECO, main engine cutoff. Those engines will shut down. The core stage will separate, drop away. It's eventually going to splash down in the ocean. And that hands over the propulsion duties to this, our upper stage, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, or ICPS. Its first job is to execute what's known as a perigee raise maneuver. So the perigee is the lowest part of your orbit. You have a perigee, that's your low part, and an apogee, that's your highest point. We're going to raise up the perigee, and that's going to actually put us in a nice circular path around the planet. And while we're there, that gives us time to check out Orion. We're flying it in space for the second time, the first time in this fully integrated stack with SLS. We'll be able to look at all of Orion's systems, make sure those solar arrays are capturing the sun's energy and turning it into electrical power for Orion's systems, make sure the communications are working, all of our guidance, navigation, and control. That is your time to make sure you have a healthy spacecraft before you do something that is going to send it to the moon. And that's next up on our list. That's the trans-lunar injection. For today's launch profile, that's going to be a firing of about 18 minutes of that single engine on the upper stage. Now that engine optimized for a vacuum, it's producing about 24,000 pounds of thrust. So it's a pretty big engine, and it's doing that because we need enough energy to be able to send our payload, Orion, beyond low Earth orbit and send it on a path to head out to the moon. Now, after that burn is complete, ICPS separates. It's going to do what's called a disposal burn. So it's going to send itself on a path from Earth around the moon and slingshot out into what's known as a heliocentric orbit. So it's going to completely leave the Earth-Moon system and go into orbit around our sun. But after it separates, propulsion duties get handed over to this European service module, and it's got a couple of different engines that it's going to be using, and we're going to be testing those out just on day 1. We're going to do what's called the outbound trajectory
整个上面级的第3次点火蛮关键的，它目的是为了让整个火箭残骸脱离地球引力圈。就运载火箭的残骸控管真的是也是一个需要注意的问题。现在大多数的2级都有反推减速，让它调回大气层燃烧，或者是直接进入绕日轨道的解决方案。至于第1集，就目前会出现这个问题的，好像也只有长征5号。T- 多少了？现在还在后的，现在还在后呢。现在还卡在 T-10， 然后T 应该说不是 T-10， 是 T-10 minutes。T-10 基本上是 T-10, 9, 8.
statute miles off the lunar surface as we do this outbound powered flyby. Again, the major thrust coming from that orbital maneuvering system engine. After we do that, we'll do a final maneuver to actually go into that distant retrograde orbit, that DRO. Now, why DRO? Why are we not just going around the moon and coming back on like a free return trajectory, which we did on some of the Apollo missions? Well, in DRO, it's a very stable orbit. It doesn't require a lot of fuel to maintain that area around the moon. So it gives you a lot of time to really test the spacecraft.
目前 NASA 官方是说发射无限期延后，直到这个发射窗口结束。也就是说，它最晚是后得到2个小时的窗口结束。也就是说，我们2个小时之内就可以知道它到底Artemis 1到底能不能发射了。对，2个小时。
Before we put people on board. That's why we're heading out to DRO. Eventually, though, it's going to be time to come home, and we will do a DRO departure maneuver. This, again, firing up that orbital maneuvering system engine and others on the service module, and this is what's going to commit us from leaving.
也就是说，他们必须在2个小时之内解决问题。如果这些问题能够解决，那Artemis 1就可以够。
Slingshot and use the lunar gravity to do this return-powered flyby, and then. Similar to the way out, we can make correction burns as we kind of fine-tune our path back towards the Earth. And then it's time for re-entry. A couple of things happen before that. One of the really critical ones, spacecraft separation. We're going to detach the European service module shortly before re-entry. Its job largely done. That burns up in the Earth's atmosphere and reveals.
不过说到 Orion 这个东西本身啊，你最喜欢的 Orion 还是？后2个小时够狠，是真的狠。我们也只能等啊。不过这个 service module 从这个角度看起来真的是蛮像那个 Starliner 的。直播组和主持们都要叫救命，没关系，我们可以。如果他敢后2个小时，明天就晚2个小时睡觉，然后明天上课的时候睡。拜托够啊！因为今天白天的时候，米儿就有跟同学聊到这个问题。What is the confidence factor you think the SOS is going to go tonight? And I say 15%. It's like, okay, 5%.
Parachute deploy. There's 11 parachutes in total that are going to slow Orion down before it splashes down.
还是那句话，说实话，
为什么？300 miles an hour before those parachutes deploy.
我们不怕土星5号叫回来用。
Of getting it in the water in the South Pacific. We've got these big orange balloons. That's an uprighting system. So.
目前 NASA 是在介绍那个，这个是那个，这个舱是 Orion 还是 Apollo 的？看起来应该是 Orion 的，因为记得 Apollo 它周围会有一圈，它在下面周围会有一圈充气的那个东西。业内人都没信心，也不是所有人都是业内人呐。在 整个航太圈在这边其实也只有少数的人是在 NASA 工作的。其实跟航太有关的小公司非常多，像在米耶的学校，那个 Ball Aerospace 跟 Sierra Aerospace 就在米耶的学校附近。如果要说要介绍这两家公司的话，那个James Webb 的它的镜片调整的伺服机构，就是去调整那些六角形的镜片，让它维持正确的弧度跟角度的那个伺服器，就是 Ball Aerospace 做的。然后那个 Sierra Aerospace 的话，就是做那个 Dream Chaser 的太空飞机的公司。然后 Dream Chaser 一开始说要用那个 Atlas V， 就是秦先生5号打。现在秦先生5号都要退役了，他还没有上去，就他应该可以用 Vulcan 打吧？目前看起来，那个 ULA 是想用 Vulcan 去取代掉，他们想要 Vulcan 取代 Atlas V， 所以应该就是如果是 Vulcan 可以打的，就是原本用 Atlas V 打的东西，应该都可以挪到 Vulcan 上面打。然后，刚刚那个 NASA 那一闪而过的那个杆子撞上去的画面，是那个去那个 Banner 小行星进行采样的那颗卫星。然后，说实话，那个参与那个任务的教授的作业，米儿还没有写出来。米儿跟教授说，能不能再给米儿1个礼拜，再1个周末，应该就可以写出来了。然后除了 Sierra Aerospace 跟 Ball Aerospace 之外，礼拜1的时候是有 SpaceX 的人过来演讲啊，然后就整个航太业界也不是只有 NASA， 特别是在运载火箭这一块，像波音跟洛马，还有诺格，那些基本上会做战斗机的军工巨头，都参与航太。因为说实话，航太跟国防和那个航空领域真的关系是非常紧密的。然后后面那台月球车你要现在在负责忙的其中一个 project 就是设计那个月球车的人机交互界面，然后去评估说，去让很多的受试者评估说这东西好不好开这样。当然真的要候了2个小时，你只能在这边看他放这些宣传片2个小时啊。是应该把卡梅拉打开来。不行，现在玩可能玩下去就不用看发射了。可以说那个成功的充气隔热垫，那个隔热垫是一个蛮有趣的回收装置，就是它真的是很像在卡马20玩家会出现的操作这样子，就是它的目的是为了回收Vulcan的第1级发动机。他们选择的回收方式是说，他们让第1级的燃料棒抛掉之后，在发动机的前面展开一个充气隔热盾，然后只回收第1级发动机的部分。就这也是一个回收火箭的思路，毕竟火箭上最金贵的东西之一就是他们的火箭发动机了。但是说实话，你还是比较喜欢 Vulcan 的回收方式。没声音了？有吧。昨天莫名其妙掌握了在全球任意地点起飞载具重生点的能力，那应该是什么奇怪的新 mode 吧？对。 应该是吧。那个 mode 能说一下名字吗？女儿，我让你去看一下。虽然女儿的开飞机送小猎人去南极的计划，可能真的是要拖到学习结束才能做完。
Throughout this launch broadcast, our NASA's
Leah
Martin
Martin
has been introducing us to people over at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex.
对，有声音，有声音，有声音。
Come out
好。
for hopefully the maiden voyage of Artemis 1. People from near and far, young and old, just really excited to hopefully see this historic flight. So now she's joined by somebody else who has a really interesting story. Leah, tell us about it.
Megan, I think one of the most exciting things about being here tonight is being with people who are like-minded, who have such a strong tie to the history of our nation's space program and their love of space flight. And I actually struck up an amazing conversation with Scott here, and you were telling me about
发射会在下午1点45，就是说，换算一下，换算一下，换算一下。原本是说几点来着？糟糕。原本是几点来着？1点45，12点45。
He brought me here to see Apollo 11 launch. So that was my first launch. I was 5 years old. I loved it. Still remember the sound. That's about all.
等一下，不会是当地下午
？Years later, through my flying
不是，只是下午，所以是台湾时
I was
间。
able to bring my sons back with my friends that flew the shuttle, and they saw 5 launches and 4 landings.
不对啊，不对啊，这时间对不上啊！现在那边是台湾时间，不是下午2点26分嘛？对啊，对啊，45分。所以他们希望能够在15分钟内解决问题，应该不是吧？
And hopefully I'll be around for the next one when we go and land again.
1445加5等于145。
Incredible. So you have NASA actually in your DNA. Grew up with the program.
Yeah. I knew most of the German scientists. The kids sat in our lab, Dr. Ernst Stirlinger, and my father flew with von Braun because he was a general aviation pilot as well. So they'd get off work and fly, and they were in Life magazine together. National Geographic, so it was fun. I literally got to knew Al Shepard, all the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo guys, and it was an honor. I would have loved to.
真的是要同时 check 一堆人的推特啊。
But I can still come here and see them.
We can, and we're so grateful, so thrilled to see you here tonight, and so excited that you will be able to actually compare the last
24分钟前是
the
keep
last one
hold
with the
的，
one tonight. It's
然
absolutely going to rock the
后
sky.
To be even louder. I want to feel it. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's been an honor to meet you, and Megan.
然后就没有更多的消息了。对，
Leah,
目
thank
前
you
没
so
有。
much for sharing that. That was such a fun story.
如果真的能够成功发射 Red Crew， 真的是功不可没，当然是功不可没。感谢赞美伟大的 Red Crew。那个是别人补充的讯息，当地说的应该是东岸时间吧，就是卡角那边的时间。
Glad to have them here. Oh my gosh, I love this.
Yeah, the team in Marshall and Huntsville there is always ready for their shot, waving their flags. They're super pumped. That's the home to the SLS program office, so they have a dog in the fight tonight, seeing Artemis launch for the first time.
Is that an inflatable astronaut in the center? Do you see that? I think somebody is dressed up as an astronaut.
Look at that.
Yeah,
They're ready to
representing.
go.
I love this. Yeah, I'm so glad that they're there.
会不会我们需要的人？这绝对是重复播放的这种事情。他们已经在那边站多久了？
Decided to hold a watch party, and
look,
that's
our
exciting
friends
to
in
see.
Germany are ready for us.
到底要让他 hold 多久？他如果要 hold 得到45分的话，就只剩15分钟了。
Airbus is the main contractor for the European
还是听一下
Got a convoy and a blah 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 live stream and all this stuff. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but I wasn't gonna miss this. I was not going to come here with with my phone and witness this. This is one that I've been waiting. This is literally one of the reasons why I started my YouTube channel and why I started live streaming and why I started.
刚开学前几周的时候，说要发射，是真的 地扣网站的那个都打开了，想要真的飞到那个卡角去看，后来他们取消了。真的是很想去现场看，但是就可能等其他的火箭吧。至少 SLS 一时半刻你们是不是很想相信他们的发射时间
？The launch team, NASA's test director, is continuing to move the team forward. We've wrapped up work on the upper stage and the lower stage. You're looking now live inside firing room 1. Our launch director, Charlie Blackwell Thompson, is overseeing her launch team. We've had a number of delays that have put us off the T0, but we are starting to track to a T0 close to around quarter till, top of the hour. But we do need to have some polling that takes place. I'm pausing now because I'm listening in to the teams as they communicate.
蛮有趣的一点是，现在 Every Astronaut 那边也，他也僵住了。这个状况真的是蛮难后话题的。
Currently 26 minutes into, it's 2 hours long. It runs until 3:04 a.m. Eastern time.
还好没飞去，对，真的是还好没有飞去。对啊，去了可以看大火箭啊，可是就，你还是我已经开始有点怀疑说这个东西不是。给 NASA 演练 SLS 发射流程的道具火箭，那其实也是一只假的 SLS 对吧？他们只是拿来给 NASA 做彩排用的。等他们彩排完了，还有一只备用的真正的 SLS 准备发射，应该是这样子吧。
Just recently, the team cycled the liquid hydrogen valves, which is required, and they are currently on the LO2 valve, liquid oxygen valves in the upper stage. That work is almost done. We are now a minute and a half away
目前的说法是 heading 45分没有
the whole of the mission management team, which is several minutes before T-minus 15 minutes.
你要绝对去上个厕所，来，避免等一下，万一他们真的在45分发射的时候看不到，所以对，暂时消失一下。
NASA's test director has informed the launch team to all switch to a common communication channel. It's called 232. And what this means is that the entire launch team is now on one channel, and all future communication will happen there, whereas there are many channels. Now they reduce it down to one. Just heard from NASA test director Carlos Monge. I'm sorry, Jeff Spaulding. Jeff Spaulding's on. They swapped out. There are currently no constraints to launch. Great news. Again, no constraints to launch. And they're getting ready to pick up with a poll to determine readiness for launch.
It might actually be happening. This is, that's huge news. I hope you guys all heard that. That was big, saying there are no constraints. There are currently no constraints. That's the big one. So they're going to be going into the go, no-go poll. And I can't believe it. No constraints. That's fantastic. we definitely have not gotten this far into a launch. This is, of course, only the third actual launch attempt.
目前 NASA 的画面是没有放那个 T-minus count 的。
They've gotten into this. Again, once we get the go no go poll, we will get a T0 time.
之前
We
这
actually will get that T0 clock going.
Firefly 就 我们敬佩那个发射团队的努力。不过印象中最好笑的一件事情就是说 Firefly 的火箭炮的失败，然后股票就看它的股价就毕竟它是实打实的丢失的有效载荷。
Yeah, I hope we should be able to get that audio in here. I mean, it might even.
Rockets go.
Here we go.
All right, copy all. And Launch Director NTD, our launch team is ready to proceed at this time.
I copy all NTD. At this time, I will
我听到够
proceed
了，
with my poll.
真的吗？
And attention on 232, this is the launch director performing the final poll for launch. Verify no constraints and go for launch. EGS Program Chief Engineer.
EGS Program Chief Engineer
现在的
verifies that the
现在
EGS,
的
SLS, and
现在的
Aurorium Program
心
Chief
情就
Engineers
跟
have no constraints and are go for
第一
launch.
次坐上飞机的时候
Copy, Greg. Thank you.
听到来自
EGS
机长的
Chief
广播一样
Safety
兴奋。
Officer.
The EGS CSO verifies the SLS Orion and EGS CSOs have no constraints
It's time.
and are go
It's
for
time.
launch.
It's time. Guys,
Copy,
it's
John.
time.
Thank you. Range weather.
We are ready to go.
Weather
We
has
are
no
ready to
constraints
go.
and weather is go for launch.
We are ready
Copy
to
LWO
go.
and mission manager. And mission manager, launch director.
Launch Director, Mission Manager on 232. The mission management team has been polled. You have a go to proceed with terminal count and launch of Artemis 1.
I copy all, thank you. And NTD, launch director.
Go ahead, Launch Director.
Yes, sir. On behalf of all the men and women across our great nation who have worked to bring this hardware together to make this day possible, and for the Artemis generation, this is for you. At this time, I give you a go to resume count and launch Artemis 1.
Copy, Launch Director, and thank you.
我
All
现
right,
在
we do
心
have a
情
couple
真
of
的，
steps to
要说
configure, and
兴
then we
奋
will
程
be
度的
ready to
话，
resume the clock.
如果
CVSE
不说
NTD.
是坐在飞机上，飞机离开了停机坪，准备滑到跑道上，然后听着机长的广播，说什么各位乘客好，欢迎登上什么什么航班，就跟第一次坐上火车的时候，火车离开月台，产生推背感的那一次，那个兴奋的感觉是一样的。
Okay, so there you heard the poll from Launch Director.
Early.
Go, no go poll. Go for launch. It's time to count
Getting
down.
ready to get that
It's
new
time.
T0 time.
It's time.
The poll that you heard was the NASA Test Director's poll.
真的，真的，
All
已经
right,
等
we
了太
verified
久
no
了。
cutouts at this time. And all personnel, we are going to resume the
试成
clock.
试成失败，不管怎么说，
GLS, you
这
can
个
resume the clock on your mark.
整个二的计
GLS
划，
copies. Countdown clock will resume on my mark. 3, 2, 1.
终于开始。
Mark. GLS mainline has been initiated.
Okay.
T-minus 10 minutes and counting.
We are T-minus 10 minutes away from liftoff of Artemis 1. As you can see, the
那你还
clock is
切
now
错了吧？刚
moving.
刚
Let's
看到
put
那个
that
T
up.
minus 的画面。
T-minus 9 minutes
T
and
minus 9
47
minutes.
seconds. The
It's
L-minus
time.
15 poll complete.
Show
They went
06, 47, 44 is the new liftoff time.
Affirm.
Go, go Artemis, go SLS, go space exploration.
01:47:44, 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time and 44 seconds. We went straight into terminal count. Nine minutes away. Liftoff now, 9 minutes away.
All right, our
So
team's
terminal
here.
count.
Okay,
Control has been given over to the GLS, the ground launch sequencer. a computer and software that is doing all of the commanding and monitoring of the Space Launch System. We'll hear call-outs from the GLS operator, Alex Pandalos. As well as NASA Test Director Jeff Spaulding. GLS is pre-tensioning the umbilicals at this very moment. You can see them as they run down the rocket. That's getting them ready to detach. At liftoff, those arms will swing away, will let go of the rocket in a clockwise direction. T-minus 8 minutes and counting. The GLS is performing up to 100 commands per second, including configuring ground systems for power transfer to the rocket. GLS is turning on cameras, recording video inside and outside the crew module to collect data for engineers. Purging the aft skirt booster with high flow nitrogen. Clear out any hydrogen gas that may be there. You can see the crew access arm is already retracted. When there is crew during Artemis 2, it would happen at T-minus 6 minutes. But out of abundance of caution, they went ahead and retracted the arm well ahead of liftoff.
在希尔载人任务中，他们会在发射前6分钟左右让
Want to point your attention to the base of the mobile launcher? Something wasn't done to reduce the power from the pressure caused by the rocket's ignition and thunderous sound. It could damage the rocket. So the ignition overpressure and sound suppression system will flood the mobile launcher with water. You'll see that sequence start at T-minus 17 seconds. Now coming up in less than 30 seconds, the ground launch sequencer will start bringing the high energy systems online, starting with core stage pressurization.
Prime on ground better than put in air, for sure. Especially your vehicle is carrying astronauts, cosmonauts, taconauts, something like that.
For the next call.
GLS is go for core stage tank pressurization.
感觉明天
The core stage
应该说等
tank
一下
is
可
now
能
pressurizing to flight
校区应
levels.
该都会
The
不知道会不会有
replenish
人放鞭
valve
炮
to the liquid hydrogen tank now closing. The liquid oxygen tank will come a little later. Now we're arming the Orion ascent pyros and transfer to internal power.
最后火箭改由内部系统供电，发射场的供电断开。
The launch abort system or LAS jettison motor is now armed. On this flight, the abort motor is
发射
inactive
中止
because
系统
there is no
的
crew on board.
系统
Up
启动，
next is the flight termination system, or FTS, which
就是说
gives the
上面
Space
发射
Force
塔的
the
点火
ability
系
to
统已经
destruct
进
the
入非运
rocket
作
if
状
it
态
goes in the wrong
然后
direction.
飞行中止系
Let's
统
listen in for that.
启动。
GLS is go for FTS arm.
The flight termination system is now armed. Coming up at 4 minutes and 40 seconds, a big moment. This is where the RS-25 engines and their bleed go to high flow. It's been a little tricky to dial in.
GLS is go for LH2 high flow
4分
bleed
40
check.
秒是关键点。LH2 high flow。
Good word, we've passed that. The cryo team got the
在通过
LH2 engine bleed pressure loop dialed in.
也就是说，
They are now at
4
the
台
right
245
temperature for
的
launch.
液态
Countdown
氢供应链
continues.
路已经
T-minus 4 minutes, 15 seconds.
通过测试，可以
Up
让
next,
疫情
GLS
通过
fires。up the CAPUs. Those are high-speed turbines which provide pressure to hydraulic pumps that steer the RS-25s. Stands for Core Stage Auxiliary Power Unit Start.
GLS is go for core stage APU start.
That now leads to the thrust vector control test at T-minus 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That can proceed now, and we will see
2分半的时候
the
要
engine's gimbal at the bottom of the
执
core
行那
stage.
个 TVT 转向测试，应该也不是什么大问题了。
At T-minus 3 minutes and 10 seconds, you will hear the go for purge sequence 4. That's a helium purge of the 4 core stage engines downstream of the propellant valve, getting the air and moisture out.
GLS is go for purge sequence 4. GLS is go for purge sequence 4.
And in just a few seconds, GLS will close the core stage LOX vent, liquid oxygen. The white vapor cloud caused from the super cold gaseous oxygen condensing the water in the atmosphere will disappear. You see it coming out there now. And there it goes, it's closed. LOX vent closed, pressure rising in the core stage LOX
排气阀关闭了，你可以看到他们发进行止冒烟了，也就是说它不再是 SLS 目前不再是处于补加模式。
At this point, we all know we're T-minus 2 minutes and 30 seconds from seeing some beautiful, beautiful history tonight.
The 4 core stage RS-25 engines gimbaling around, testing the ability to steer the rocket into space.
2 minutes away.
They will operate at 109% performance. Each RS-25 throwing down a half million pounds of thrust. All 4, 2 million pounds. All together with the boosters, 8.8 million pounds of thrust.
GLS is go for upper stage to internal power.
Now the upper stage has gone to internal power.
真的很兴奋。
So power is removed from the rocket's upper stage, the ICPS, and it's been switched to battery power. The same milestone is coming up for the core stage at T-minus 1 minute and 30 seconds.
上级进入了内部供电模式，在 T-minus 1分半的时候，星级也要进入内部供电模式。 GLS go for launch internal power. Core stage,
core stage, which houses the 3 flight computers,
internal power.
Is now on battery power. So
It's on battery powered now. 现在是电池供电了。
Because there's no more margin on the battery. So if we have a hold, we'd have to recycle back to T-minus 10 minutes and recharge those batteries.
如果电池失效的话，他们必须退回到 T-minus 10 minutes 去帮电池重新充电。T-minus 60 seconds.
1 minute.
Shortly after liftoff, Mission Control Houston will take control of the rocket, and my colleague, Leah Cheshire, will take over commentary. T-minus 50 seconds and counting. Coming up at T-minus 33 seconds, the GLS will hand off control to the ALS. This is the autonomous launch sequencer. On board the rocket, it will take over command and control of the rocket. But the ALS will check to make sure there's no holds coming from the ground up until T-minus 2 seconds.
Go for ALS.
And we are go for ALS.
That's
the Space Launch System is now counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon.
20 seconds.
Launch team can no longer recycle the count.
15.
Sound suppressor water now flowing under the ML.
Oh.
And here we go.
Here we go. Here we go. 这个火星是为了避免从主发泄漏的分离系统点火。3, 2, 1.
Boosters ignition. And liftoff of our
Let's go.
We rise together
back
to the moon and
we have a liftoff. What? 这是继土星5号之后，最大的火箭，截至目前为止，你可以看到那个，因为是夜间发射的关系，那个从出来那个不让固体颗粒的烟雾，它这个光点亮了那个星级的氢氧链。我不知道该怎么现在对形容现在那个感觉了，真的。 真的太没有真实感了。以前这么大只的火箭都只能在纪录片上看到，现在就在现在，2022年 ，right now， 真的土星5号几乎是同规模的火箭，就在玩命升空了。它现在已经进入比较高层的大气，所以我们可以看到它的那个火焰开始慢慢的散开来。
Again, quiet here in mission control.
真的，在理性的人在这个形象面前，真的。
We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour. Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison. Standing by for solid rocket
Standing
booster
by
jettison.
for
Shortly
SRB ejection. SRB. SRB 分离了。我们可以看到它旁边爆出来两个光点，然后它分离的方向是集中到其中的一侧，这是因为它是从那个太空梭推下来。当时太空梭分离的时候，为了要避免撞到太空梭，所以它的那个分离方向是朝其中一边的。在这边我们也可以看到，以及它在分离的时候，近几的四海 RS-25的那个光点。
2 minutes and 36 seconds into the flight. Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston. We've still got 4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15-foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module.
下一个区域是服务舱周围的那个盖板分离，这个东西在地面上就看不到了，只能等遥测确认。
Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060
后来就是现在相机追的这个东西，因为距离太远，看得到，
We just had confirmation that the service module fairing has separated.
一个大光点而已了。这边是火箭的舱内视角。
And that the launch abort system pyros have fired, separating those from Orion as well. For future crew members.
There, but
we just heard the call.
太美了，还看得到月球。
We just heard the call of 3-engine press, meaning if SLS were to lose an engine at this point in the mission, we could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended main engine cutoff time. However, we still have 4 good engines, all at maximum thrust right now, powering the first flight of Artemis at 5,200 miles per hour, 148 miles downrange.
RS-25 依然在正常的运作。
Did the NASA broadcast just flop on us?
We're 4 minutes and 16 seconds into the flight. We're 4 minutes and 16 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. So far, we've had a clean ascent. We saw those solid rocket boosters jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds after liftoff. Shortly after, we had the service module panels fairing separate, as well as the launch abort system. The launch abort system was inert for this flight, except to perform this separation.
的时候 ，SRB 会落海。他们好像不打算回收了，所以。 他们也看不到回落场，也不看不到前面的那个降落场。
Now traveling over 6,800 miles per hour, 229 miles downrange.
T 到 T plus A 的时候，那个 RS-25还会第一次关机，它需要运行蛮久的时间的。
Our core stage main engine cutoff time is about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. We are now 5 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, 77,656 miles per hour.
同时开了两面的那个
4 good core stage engines, those 4 RS-25 engines.
然后遥测画面在这边。
The last time those core stage engines flew, they were taking space shuttles to orbit, and now with upgraded capabilities, they're launching the future of human spaceflight.
他们原本是给太空梭用过的引擎，现在他们拖着 SLS 上去了。
42 seconds into the mission, we are now traveling 8,800 miles per hour, 345 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. Again, we are anticipating core stage main engine cutoff at about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. And about 10 seconds later, we'll see core stage separation, at which point Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will be flying free. Now traveling over 10,000 miles per hour, 6 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1, 427 miles downrange. Quiet here on the loops in Mission Control Houston. Teams continue to monitor this first flight. About a minute and a half now until that core stage main engine cutoff time. Our 4 core stage engines continue to fire at maximum thrust. Coming up on 7 minutes since launch today, now traveling over 12,800 miles per hour, 563 miles downrange. Again, still quiet here in Mission Control Houston.
Mission Control Houston still quiet. 我们可以看到它服务舱的整流罩分离之后，就是把它真的太阳能板露出来。因为它脱离的部分其实不是极尖段，而是应该说它罩住的是上面几根服务舱之间的那个凹进去的部分。
30 seconds now until core stage main engine cutoff. All 4 engines continue to throttle down.
4台 RS-25降低推力，因为在30秒后要先要关
Now
闭。
7 minutes 45 seconds into the flight, traveling over 16,000 miles per hour. Continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control Houston. We're standing by for core stage main engine cutoff. And we have confirmation of core stage main engine cutoff. Orion is now in Earth's orbit.
确定。
The flight dynamics
新一
officer
级关
reports
机
that we have a nominal
2级分
main
离
engine cutoff. And we just heard the call for core stage separation. That means Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage are now flying free from the core stage of the Space Launch System. The next milestone will be solar array deploy approximately 18 minutes after liftoff. But before Orion stretches its wings, let's check back in with our friends at Kennedy Space Center and hear all about what it was like to hear the rocket roar off the launch pad. Megan and Kayla, I've got to hear all about it.
Well, if you're just joining us, welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where we just watched Artemis 1 launch, our first step towards our next adventure into deep space. As Leah said, I'm NASA's Megan Cruz, and this is NASA astronaut Kayla Barron. And I'm kind of still giddy and speechless. I don't even know how to explain how I'm feeling right now.
Orion
I
跟
feel
它
the
的上面
same
级
way. This is the first launch that I've been able
已
to
经
watch
进
in
入
person. And I've
已
got
经
to
进入了一
say,
个
it was
很接近入轨的
incredible.
轨
I
道
was just
它
took
是
my
一
breath
个
away and I was tearing
它
up.
是一个倾角
What
34 度
an，
近地
amazing
点
accomplishment for this
30公里，
team.
远地点
This international
1000
team, people who have been dedicating their careers to getting this rocket off the ground and
1800
taking the first step
公
to
里左
getting
右
a
的轨
crew
道。
on that vehicle back to the moon. It was just incredible.
Yeah, this is a moment I think that
然
we're all going to
后
remember where we were when we saw
现
this
在要
sort of
等
thing, you
那
know what I mean? And
个
it was great to
2级
see,
跟
again,
Orion
when
的
we
组合
entered
体
into
飞
terminal
到
count,
自由
everybody
滑
here
行
just
道
started
T plus
cheering, you know, coming out to get a really good
T
view. And
plus
boy, I mean,
15
it
minutes
lit up
对
the
大
night
概
sky,
它的后
and it just
53
shook
分钟的
everything
时
around.
候
Did you feel that?
，2
Like in my
第一
bones,
次
I
启动。
felt that.
Oh yeah, I mean, the cool thing is just kind of the delay between what you see and what
Yes.
you hear, because of course the sound travels a little bit slower, and it was just amazing.
Nice job,
The ground
RS-25.
shook. We could hear the
I mean,
thrust pushing
RIP.
that rocket into space. 8.8
Thanks for
million
your
pounds of thrust.
contribution.
Yes.
It's
The
incredible.
Space Shuttle
It was
program
amazing to see
and
here
the
live in
SLS
person.
program.
How does it compare? So this is your
I mean,
first
the Artemis
launch
1.
on the ground. How does it compare to your launch when you're in the capsule soaring towards space?
I mean, equally emotional, I think.
Yeah.
We train for everything, and so when we're in that capsule waiting for launch, we're just running our procedures. You could almost, you know, trick us and say that we were in the simulator and it wasn't real, but like in that moment of liftoff, when the thrust builds underneath you, like we saw it today, it's just hard not to be overwhelmed by the emotional experience, the excitement, the joy of that moment. It's incredible.
Yeah, I
真的
think
可以在晚
we
上发
can't
射
say it
这个
enough.
火箭的遥测
This team
画面
really
一定很棒。
deserved this moment. They've been working so hard for this moment. When I heard that we got into terminal count, it was, I felt a sense of relief and excitement for them that I think everybody here did. You know, we really wanted them to succeed. We really wanted to see the launch today. And wow, I will never forget this.
Me neither. It was an incredible experience to be here and see that happen.
Yeah. Was there anything that was particularly surprising to you? Again, this is your first launch. You know, what were you expecting?
You know, I think we also had a nighttime launch for our launch, and so I think one thing you underestimate is how much it lights up the night sky. We were able to watch it all the way through that trajectory. We were able to see the boosters separate and everything. So it's just an incredible view. It's amazing how much you get to see of the flight path when it's at night and sliding up the sky.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed this, but we see the moon here, and the trajectory of the rocket looked like it was flying towards me. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, that's so poetic. It's so beautiful. I'm so glad we launched today.
Yeah.
Wow.
To the team. It's incredible.
We're going to head over to Daryl, who was at the launch team. Daryl, you got to count us down through that, through liftoff. I mean, how was that being in the launch control center with them?
Well, Megan, it was something else. I got to tell you, you're looking live inside the firing room where Charlie Blackwell-Thompson is about to address her team after a whole lot of hard work and preparation to get to this moment. Let's stand by and listen to her now.
好吧，那个SLS 发射的画面其实
Can you guys hear me? No.
目前 Everyday Astronaut 那边没有回放从远处拍的画面。
The room can't. You can hear me? Because the guys. I don't know what he's telling me to do.
Ground Control 窗外面的那盏灯看起来真的是，会以为说外面现在有什么东西射出去了。现在天气其实蛮湿冷的。
Is here.
Can you guys hear me? Oh, there we go. Is he ready for me? Well, for once, I might be speechless.
太阳能板。
So you guys know I have talked a lot about appreciating the moment that you're in, and we have worked hard as a team. You guys have worked hard as a team for this moment. This is your moment. It is not by chance that you are here today. So I want you to look around at this team and know that you have earned it. You have earned your place in the room. You have earned this moment. You have earned your place in history. You were part of a first. Doesn't come along very often. Once in a career, maybe. But we are all part of something incredibly special, the first launch of Artemis. The first step in returning our country to the moon and on to Mars. What you have done today will inspire generations to come. So thank you. Thank you for your resilience. You know, I said at the pre-test briefing, the harder the climb, the better the view. We showed the Space Coast tonight. What a beautiful view it is. So congratulations.
The higher climb, better the view.
So we got a couple of traditions here in launch control. And the first one is when you're in the position for the first time, you get a tie cutting. And so I have my launch director scissors. And I'm going to get my tie cut by a couple of legends that are here. And then anyone who wants their tie cut will be making the rounds in the firing room. You got your console chiefs, if they want to do it, that's fine. If you want me to do it, you might have to wait a little while, but I'll stay all night if I have to. It'll be my pleasure to cut ties. So I'm going to take care of mine, and then I have one other presentation that I want to make this evening.
剪领带，剪领带。
This is Charlie Blackwell Thompson, Artemis 1 launch director. She just got her tie cut. That is a tradition here at NASA. We just got to hear her talk to the team, and one thing that really stuck out to me that she said is that they've really earned their place in history. We're coming up on solar array deploy. Let's go on to Leah.
Thanks, Megan. And yes, we're here in Mission Control Houston, still monitoring the Artemis 1 mission and the first flight of Orion atop the Space Launch System. So far, we saw successful liftoff at 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time, all the way through separation from the core stage. We now have Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage flying free. And we've just heard that we have initiated solar array deploy. So we are turning our focus to that. The spacecraft was running on battery power, but stretching Wing's wings will allow it to stop relying on those batteries and significantly extend the time it can stay in space. So solar array deploy takes about 12 minutes. We have 4 solar arrays that we need to deploy and latch. These will provide power to the spacecraft on its journey to distant retrograde orbit and all the way back to Earth. Once these are properly configured, again, Orion will no longer need to rely solely on battery power. And we expect this to be done about 30 minutes after liftoff. Right now, we're 19 minutes since liftoff today. Orion is now traveling 17,175 miles per hour. We're continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control Houston from the flight controllers monitoring the mission. A little bit about these solar arrays as we wait. Again, we heard the call that the deploy has been initiated. We'll hear a little bit more about that once they start to unfold. These 4 solar arrays generate 11 kilowatts of power, which is enough electricity to power 2 3-bedroom houses, and they have a wingspan of 63 feet. Just one of these 6.5 by 6.5 foot panels has 1,250 solar cells. So you're looking at a total of 15,000 solar cells. Now, we just heard the call that all 4 solar arrays have been released. So we initially heard the initiation call. That command had been sent. Now those 4 solar arrays are released. Again, this is about a 12-minute process. The solar arrays will deploy straight, and you're getting a live view right now. This is really exciting. They'll eventually be swept back against the vehicle prior to translunar injection burn to prevent any loads from breaking or damaging the arrays. And on the end of each solar array is a camera that will capture imagery for us throughout the mission, along with a few other cameras placed outside and inside the spacecraft to help us monitor and perform various other inspections. Of course, if you recall the Apollo capsule design, there were no solar arrays. We had fuel cells instead. So this design with arrays gives us the opportunity to stay in orbit longer since we practically have no limit to the energy available for use from the sun. Coming up on 21 minutes since liftoff. Orion is attached to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. You can see those 4 solar arrays unfolding now. And again, Artemis 1 is a flight test. It's paving the way for a sustainable presence at the moon. Looking forward to the future, Gateway will be our space station in lunar orbit. And we have some similarities and differences in the solar arrays unfolding right now on Orion and those that'll be on Gateway. So like we're seeing now, these are deploying autonomously. The Gateway solar arrays will as well. And while these generate those 11 kilowatts of power, the 2 rollout solar arrays, or ROSAs, on Gateway will generate 60 kilowatts of power. That ROSA design is currently being tested aboard the space station. We have 2 new ones installed and a spacewalk conducted earlier today, preparing for another set. Coming up on 22 minutes since liftoff today, Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage traveling over 16,800 miles per hour. The solar arrays deploying now are part of the European Service Module. It's comprised of 20,000 parts and components. The Service Module was developed as part of an agreement between NASA and the European Space Agency, or ESA. This is the first time NASA is using a European-built system as a critical element to power an American spacecraft.
它也是需要自由滑行到最高点，我们应该能够待到 RL10第一次点火。RL10也是一款非常非常棒的发动机，虽然有一段年头了，液氢一氧上面级比冲400多，非常的高效。然后就很难想象膨胀循环可以把它做到这种程度。那火箭发动机的循环是一个很有趣的话题，不过这个就等所有时间再慢慢展开讨论吧。
Coming up now, and 24 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, spacecraft now traveling at 16,500 miles per hour around the Earth. We are in solar array deploy, and we have confirmation all 4 arrays are deployed. Coming up in a little less than 30 minutes is the perigee raise maneuver.舱外摄影机，对啊，在 SpaceX 那样的发射模式兴起之后，大家都喜欢在上面放东西。应该说，大家都喜欢把舱外摄影机的画面放出来给 1:41 Eastern Time this morning, we are looking for a perigee raise maneuver about 53 minutes into today's flight. Again, we are now 25 minutes and 47 seconds into the flight, and we have a complete deployment of all 4 solar arrays. Orion's journey to the moon continues
他们要在
as
远地点
planned.
做的是
Again,
近地台
looking
点台
forward
升的
to
台
that
升机动。
perigee raise maneuver.
今年
That'll
从
be
30
coming
公
up
里拉到80 公里
again
以
at
外，
about
因为台
53
湾正
minutes
式的入轨，
into the
它目
mission,
前还
so
在一
about
个
27
射轨
minutes
道上。
from now. During the perigee raise maneuver, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will use its RL-10 engine to lift the lowest point of Orion in Earth's orbit. The current orbit is more of an oval shape than a perfect circle, and this burn will raise that point closest to Earth and make the orbit more circular. This will also include a checkout of Orion's systems and any adjustments to the solar arrays. It'll be a short burn, less than 30 seconds long, but critical to keep us on track. And it also prepares us for the next engine burn to send Orion to the moon. That's the translunar injection burn. That'll come up a little later, which is a longer burn, another firing of the RL-10 engine on the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. We caught a glimpse there of those solar arrays, and with all 4 solar arrays properly deployed, Orion's journey to the moon continues, and we've got more operational updates coming up shortly, but for now, I'm going to toss it back to Megan and Kayla at Kennedy.
Leah, thank you so much. Our return to the moon will be different than the last time. We plan to explore more of the lunar surface and learn how to live and work there. With more on our destination, let's bring back NASA's Dan Hewitt with our new moon board.
Hey, thanks, Megan. I gotta be honest, we ran outside to catch it. I'm still shaking a little bit. That never gets old. That is always one of the coolest things you'll ever see in your entire life. And that rocket was massive and loud and just so cool. All right. The moon. This is why we call it the moon board, but the moon, since the dawn of time, humans have looked at the sky and shouted at our neighbor, I'm going to walk in your face. And in the 60s, we actually did it 6 times, starting with Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Apollo 11, 1969, followed by 5 more successive landings, each time delivering 2 human beings to the surface of the moon. Our last one was Apollo 17, and that was in 1972, Gene Cernan and Harrison Smith stepping off for the last time. Now, we have not sent humans back since then, but they accomplished a lot under Apollo. Lots of technological advancements, deployed science instruments, brought back hundreds of pounds of lunar rocks and regolith, teaching us about the moon and also about our place in the solar system. The moon is fascinating because it doesn't have a lot of the geological processes we have here on Earth. You don't have erosion, you don't have wind and water wearing down rocks, you don't have plate tectonics that are constantly recycling the crust, and so everything out there is really old. In fact, one of the rocks brought back on Apollo 15 called the Genesis rock was dated to be 4 billion years old, so from the primordial beginnings of our solar system. But as Kayla said a little bit earlier, those missions were measured in days, their spacewalks in just hours. With Artemis, we're looking to go and we're looking to stay. And we're not looking around the equator like under Apollo, we're looking at the lunar South Pole. Now, why? So we haven't sent people since the 70s to the moon, but we haven't stopped studying. We've had orbiters like the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which has literally just been flying loops around the moon, taking high-resolution images of the surface. So high resolution that you can look them up. They have images of all the different Apollo landing sites, and you can actually see the footprints, the paths they left in the lunar regolith of those sites. We had a mission called L-Cross, which slammed a probe into a crater on the moon, sending out material, some of which potentially had been seen direct sunlight for billions of years, and then analyzing what shot out. And through missions like that and others, we've been able to find that there is water ice trapped in those permanently shadowed areas on the moon. A lot of them center around that South Pole. We have already identified 13 potential landing sites for the Artemis 3 mission. And these are where we're going to send our astronauts around the lunar South Pole to access that water ice. Now, Why water? Why are we caring about water?
快要
Well,
54 年
it
了。
serves a lot of purposes. Obviously, for humans, you need that to breathe. You can split water apart, get oxygen for breathing gas for an atmosphere. If you have a lunar base, you can split it into oxygen and hydrogen. That's rocket fuel. We
他
just
讲的是
launched
如
the
果
most
在如何
powerful
在
rocket
月
in
球上的水
history
资源可
using
以
those
拿来做什么事
constituent？parts. And so you can start to live off the land. We can use that, something called in situ resource utilization. And really, the whole point of that is to use the moon as
那就是
this proving
ISRU
ground.
我们常说的
We're
ISRU
trying
就是
to
就是
get
他
to
刚说的那
Mars.
四个
We're
字。
trying to learn to live on other planets where there is gravity, where we're going to have to use resources there on the ground because we won't be able to bring everything with us. And by going to the lunar South Pole, by going to stay under Artemis, we're going to be able to start practicing that. We're going to perfect those systems, perfect those techniques and operations we need to do that so we can use the moon as that jumping off point to Mars and beyond. So that's why the moon. We're going to see Orion fly around it for the very first time in just a couple of days. That launch was spectacular. I'm still way too excited, but can't wait to see some shots of the moon from up close from Orion. So I'll send it back over to you, Megan.
Thanks so much, Dan. So right now we're actually joined by members of the Red Crew. You'll remember from watching the launch coverage that the Red Crew was sent out by the launch team when the launch team identified a small leak on a hydrogen valve inside of the mobile launcher. Well, now here they are. This is Trent Annis. Trent, can you just introduce everybody else here on your team?
Yeah, so this is Chad. He's our safety guy. And behind me is Billy. And he's the experienced hydrogen tech out here.
And the three of you guys really, I would say, saved the day today. I mean, really, you guys had to go in there to what's called the blast danger zone. You guys are specially trained to be able to do operations on the pad while cryo is loading. Talk to us about getting that call, being told, hey, you guys need to go in there. And it was the first time for all three of you.
Yeah, all I could say is we were very excited. I was ready to get up there and go.
Really? How are you guys feeling?
Very, very comfortable, very confident in the test team and the procedures and our training. We did a great job.
Walk us. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
How gratifying it must be for you guys, because you train for this eventuality, but don't always get to do it. Billy was saying that he's been a Red Crew team member for 37 years, and this is the first time he's been called to go into the blast danger zone. So I know for us, when we're training for all of these eventualities, whether it's a spacewalk or robotics operations, you really want to put that training into practice. How do you guys feel like it went today?
Amazing. I still can't believe it. It's surreal to me. It's just insane.
Yeah, kind of walk us through what you were thinking. So you get there and what, is it just like game time and you're really focused, or, you know, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'd say we were very focused on what was happening up there, just making sure we knew what was happening. Because the rocket's, you know, it's alive, it's creaking, it's making venting noises, it's pretty scary. So on zero deck, my heart was pumping. My nerves were going, but yeah, we showed up today. I think as soon as we walked up those stairs, we were ready to rock and roll.
And they were telling us a bit about it while you were working on it. You guys were actually just torquing down the valve to prevent or reduce the leak rate.
液晶泄漏真的是一个绕不过去的问题。虽然觉得方法原始粗暴，但是
went up there and tightened her up.
You're probably still like in this, oh my gosh moment, like all of us are. You know, has it actually hit you, like the role you played today in making Artemis 1 launch?
You know, I still can't believe it. Like, it's, like I said, it's surreal.
I
and
still
just amazing.
cannot believe it.
I don't know about you guys, but
They're nodding along behind you. For sure. Anything
Anything
you want to say to the launch team? Again, this is a big day for the launch team, for you guys, NASA, but really the whole world. I mean, this is a historic launch that I think we'll all remember. Really.
you know, we had a lot of people here helping us out, a lot of teams, firing room. I'm sure that was hectic. And, you know, NASA, Boeing, all the other companies did a great job, and we're glad to be part of it.
One thing I always like to say is spaceflight is a team sport, and I think you guys perfectly demonstrated that today, right? Like, none of us could accomplish this on our own. It takes a really complex team. Nobody can be an expert in all of the systems, all the technology, all of the workarounds we might have to do to get a rocket off the pad. So thank you for the role you played in that team today. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you coming by to talk with us. All right, it's now been about 35 minutes since liftoff of Artemis 1. Orion and ICPS are now free flying, so let's head back to Leah again to talk about how the journey is going so far.
很难从这个画面去看出那个真的 SOS 到底多么巨大。
Thanks, Megan. And it has been a pretty smooth ride so far. And we are now, again, like you mentioned, coming up on 36 minutes since launch. That puts us about 17 minutes until the perigee raise maneuver. That's going to be the maneuver that lifts the lowest point of Orion's orbit around the Earth and puts us where we need to be ahead of the translunar injection burn. The translunar injection burn is that really long burn that we're going to need to send us on to the moon. So we've been treated to some exciting views from the spacecraft today, including, and we hope to see some from inside the cabin, but we expect to continue receiving photo updates throughout the mission. It takes a team, though, to bring the imagery of Orion down to Earth, so let's meet them.
The imagery that we're collecting on Artemis 1 and the mission itself is preparing to carry humans to the moon. The Orion Imager team is going to be monitoring every aspect of visual spacecraft performance for the entire duration of the mission. The first time that we're going to be live streaming digital video from its spacecraft back down to the Earth from the vicinity of the moon. That's never been done before. What we'll be transmitting live streaming will be lower resolution, more compressed, because we have to fit it into a thinner pipe, if you will. Every one of these cameras is in its position where it is and it's configured the way it is for a very specific reason. We're going to be monitoring anything that we can see with the cameras for spacecraft performance. The imagery teams at NASA are composed of dozens and dozens of very highly trained, very specialized people, engineers, technicians, analysts. If we can see it, we're going to try and keep an eye on it. Imagery has been invaluable throughout the history of NASA. We flew cameras on Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, all of that stuff that we saw with the astronauts around the moon. It helps us detect the unknown unknowns. It allows us to see things that we didn't anticipate happening. So when we do find people on Artemis 2, we can have a high confidence that everything is working the way it should.
接下来就是Orion 就会进入就可以准备。
I love getting a look at those teams that we don't normally see, like the red team that Megan and Kayla just got to interview. A really big thanks to them and everyone that made this liftoff happen tonight. So we are going to toss it back to Megan and Kayla now at KSC. Again, we're about 15 minutes away from perigee raise maneuver.
Yeah, we wanted to take us back into Orion and talk about some of the science that's being enabled by Artemis 1 today. So inside of Orion are 10 of these. So they're called CubeSats because they're tiny satellites. Essentially, they're the size of the shoebox when they're folded down, but then once they're deployed, they're opened up. They have solar arrays, things like that. That's when it gets a lot bigger. Now, these are called secondary payloads for this mission. Kayla, can you talk to us about what secondary payloads are?
Yeah, it just really means that it's not a primary objective of the mission. We're not relying on the success of these CubeSats for overall mission success. It's kind of a bonus payload, right? A chance to deploy these satellites that have different sensors on them and collect some awesome data to support other research objectives.
Yeah, and I know battery life was a concern for some of them, but all 10 were deployed, and scientists, I'm sure, are eager to see what kind of information that hopefully they'll be able to get. And they're just some of several research projects on this flight that will help gather data about the moon.
他们在谈论那个 SLS 第二节上面携带的地方卫星。
I think Artemis 1 is significant on so many levels. It is a new frontier to do science.
So the primary objective is to test the Orion spacecraft integrated with the Space Launch System.
And it is designed to carry out the
再过13分钟
But it's more than just learning how to travel in space. We're taking a lot of cool science along with us on this first mission to the moon.
So as NASA plans to go back to the surface of the moon and then onto Mars,
we want to spend more time there, and that's riskier business. So the more we learn about the moon itself and the environment where we'll be operating, the better we can prepare. We have 10 CubeSats we call secondary payloads, which are small scientific spacecraft of their own that will each be conducting their own scientific mission.
All of these payloads in some form or fashion will help us going forward. They are going to be studying the moon.
And they're going to help us understand what is the moon made out of.
天你也比较喜欢另外一种方式，就是说把它藏在火箭发动机旁边周围那一圈空白处，所以它就需要在火箭发动机旁边感受高温跟震动，但是这样比较酷嘛。
Or the space weather.
Some different propulsion systems. These novel ideas will ultimately turn into the technology and the systems that we want to use going forward.
There's a lot of cool things going on between all these CubeSats that make up our secondary payloads. Additionally, inside the Orion, we'll be flying an experiment to study space biology.
Space biology is where we study the underlying changes that Earth-based biological systems undergo when they're in space.
Or basically, how does life respond to the space environment?
The level of ionizing radiation that you experience when you go beyond the Van Allen belt. So you go beyond the protective magnetic sphere that we have around us. You then get exposed to higher levels of ionizing radiation. So we are flying several space biology experiments.
We will take a series of materials,
plant seeds, fungi, the yeast cell, algae,
and ride along the trip. And then when it comes home, we can analyze how they responded to that environment.
This research will help us thrive in space. It will help us to go further and stay there longer.
In addition to space biology, we'll be learning about how to make astronauts more effective in the Orion in the future. An example of that is the technology demonstration.
Lockheed Martin built the Orion space for NASA, and we'll be flying a secondary payload that's a demonstration payload called Callisto. So we took the technology from Amazon for Alexa and the WebEx technology from Cisco, and so we built a digital assistant, if you will, a custom space-qualified Alexa.
Alexa, how does the life support system work?
Orion's life support system is the environmental control and life support system oracles.
And so this payload is a demonstration mission to show how astronauts in the future could use this technology as an innovative user interface.
So there you have it. I hope you agree with me. This is exciting.
I am just over the moon excited for the Artemis 1 launch.
The science we'll conduct on Artemis 1 lays the groundwork to ensure that we can safely conduct scientific activities at the moon with our astronauts going forward. This really is the stepping stone for us as we take that next giant leap in space exploration.
So a lot of great science also happening on the International Space Station. I got to speak with astronauts Jessica Watkins and Samantha Cristoforetti while they were still on board about the research there that will benefit future Artemis missions. Jessica, Samantha, your primary job on the space station is to maintain the orbiting lab and conduct science experiments, more than 200 before Crew 4 returns home. Jessica, can you tell me about one of the experiments that will help return us to the moon with the Artemis program?
We do a lot of experiments where we are looking into developing new technologies that will enable us to go further into the solar system. And one of those technologies was the AstroRad experiment. Radiation is one of the challenges that we face when we think about going further into the solar system. And so this vest is an option for providing the crew member with protection. And then one of the mannequins on Artemis 1, launching here later this month, will also be wearing the vest. We'll get a sense for its effectiveness on board as well.
Samantha, I know that you've been doing a lot of work to test how we would grow crops in space. What crops are you growing on Space Station right now, and what's unique about them?
Indeed. Actually, right next to us as we are talking to you, we have a little space station vegetable garden. It's called X-Root, and in a few weeks it will be full of fully grown, hopefully tomatoes and carrot plants. I don't have much of a green thumb, I must confess, but when I harvested those plants and I could really breathe in all that smell, even if there is no soil, it still has that smell that you would associate on the ground with walking, through a vegetable garden after a rainy day, when there is that moisture in the air, and that was just so pleasant after, such a long time living away from any kind of natural environment. It was very, very pleasant for me.
If it makes you feel any better, I also do not have a green thumb. So what about water? How are you testing critical life support systems like water to hopefully help us stay off Earth longer than we ever have before?
Sure. Yes. So we kind of use the tagline that yesterday's coffee becomes today's coffee. So there's a process by which we can filter our urine, and so we are at the point now where we are able to recycle about 96% of essentially of our water on board, and are continuing to test new technologies to get even closer to the 98% utilization rate that we need for the moon in particular.
Samantha, what are you most excited about for Artemis 1?
Seeing that gigantic rocket take off, and I think it will be just a sign of all those great things to come.
Jessica, you could one day walk on the moon as part of the Artemis program. How does that make you feel?
The idea of being able to explore the surface of another planetary body, especially for me as a geologist and a planetary geologist specifically, is just super exciting. All of the science that we're going to be able to conduct from the surface of the moon.
Jessica, Samantha, thank you so much. And before you go, I'd love to see a flip.
可惜因为 RS-25是氢氧燃料的关系，几乎是看不到它的那个。
I love it. And a double backflip at that. Now, Kayla, you of course lived and worked on the International Space Station as part of Crew 3. Do you enjoy, or did you enjoy, doing all those science experiments while you were there? It's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, it's incredible to be a part of every single experiment. It's an honor to play a small role in it. We got to do some really cool tech demonstrations while we were up there too. So for me as an engineer, that was really fun. That's a photo of me doing the first scanning electron microscope samples on the International Space Station. And it was cool for me because I worked with a scanning electron microscope in my graduate school research that took up it was as big as this desk.
Oh.
But seeing a miniaturized version of those that we have up there, and imagining how we could use it in a lunar or Martian laboratory to better analyze samples and decide what to bring home was really exciting.
Yeah, and you touched on this earlier before, but I do think it's just so important to note again that you're doing science for scientists who've been working on their studies for decades. Some of them. So to fulfill that, how does that make you feel?
It's incredible. We're almost like their laboratory technicians for that little moment in time, but they've been working their entire life, sometimes decades, years, to get that science payload up there. And it's a really unique laboratory environment. The microgravity environment, the space environment, the radiation environment, like you've already talked about in those videos, provides an opportunity to do science that we just can't do here on Earth.
Yeah, to think that what we do on the International Space Station can fuel future Artemis missions. I think the fact that they go hand in hand is really cool. All right, so let's take some more social media questions. Social media is buzzing right now since we launched about 48 minutes ago. So why don't we take the first question, I think again from actor, oh no. Let's see, Kayla, how do you feel after launch?
Super inspired. I mean, we talked about it earlier with the Red Crew and in the moments just after launch, but this is really the culmination of a giant team effort. It takes every single member of our team to pull off a successful launch. It's incredibly complicated, incredibly challenging, and in some cases kind of dangerous for a Red Crew team who went inside the blast danger area to make a fix that was critical to today's launch. And so to see the team succeed and feel that excitement was incredible.
I really still have Charlie Blackwell Thompson's words ringing in my head. The fact that she said the harder the climb, the better the view.
Absolutely.
100% correct. All right, next question is from actor Jack Black. He starred in a movie called Apollo 10.5. He has a question for Kayla.
Okay, Jack's final question, I promise. Let's talk about Orion. How long will it take for Orion to fly around the moon and come home? And what's that re-entry gonna be like? Sounds like it might be a little hot. Coming in hot.
You're exactly right, Jack. It is a 26-day mission that we have planned for Artemis, where it will go to the moon, go into a distant retrograde orbit, so we'll get a few close flybys and then some time in deep space past the moon. And then, yeah, that re-entry is going to be something else. It's going to be 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, super hot. And so we'll be looking at how the heat shield performs just to ensure that it'll be able to protect the crew for that speed and temperature.
That's half as hot as the sun.
yes, it's incredibly hot. So we rely on that heat shield to keep our systems and our crew safe. But we expect that it'll perform well, but we're excited to see how it does in about 26 days.
Okay. One last question from social media. What qualifications are required to become an astronaut?
You have to study STEM. You have to have a master's degree or higher in a STEM field. But besides that, we're looking for people who are awesome team players. So there's a lot of different roads to become an astronaut.
We seem to be getting a lot of questions about how people themselves can become astronauts. I think that's really cool that we might see and inspire, again, people who might think about becoming astronauts.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you, Kayla, and thank you for those who sent in those questions. We are about 15 minutes after the launch of Artemis 1, and we are approaching the next critical milestone, that's perigee raise maneuver. So let's head back over to Leah in Mission Control.
Thanks, Megan. And you're right, we are coming up on perigee raise maneuver about 2 minutes from now. We are now 51 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1 after lifting off at 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time from Kennedy Space Center. The vehicle now traveling over 14,600 miles per hour. So during Orion's orbit of Earth, it reaches an apogee and a perigee. The apogee is the highest point above Earth's surface, and the perigee is the lowest. Therefore, this perigee raise maneuver is a firing of the ICPS RL-10 engine, and it's going to raise the lowest point of Orion's orbit over Earth. This also included a checkout of Orion's systems and any adjustments to the solar arrays. All 4 of those solar arrays, as you can see, are swept back. That's going to keep them from having any loads imparted that might damage them for use later in the mission. This also, the perigee raise maneuver, will put us in the proper position for the translunar injection burn. That's that really big and long burn that we need to send us to the moon. We're about 1 minute away from the perigee raise maneuver. This is a shorter burn. It's less than 30 seconds.
他们可以为了比冲去牺牲它的推力，所以基本上高层轨道这些轨道机动都会花比较长的时间。
About 45 seconds until the perigee raise maneuver.
再过45秒进行轨道提升机动，所以这个动画其实是不正确的，但是没有关系。
Coming up on 53 minutes into today's mission, and we are standing by for the start of the perigee raise maneuver. Again, this is a firing of the RL-10 engine on the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. It's less than 30 seconds long. And we have confirmation of perigee raise maneuver ignition and full thrust. This is a live view from the spacecraft. Again, a really short burn. We're standing by for the cutoff.
这个晃动就挺真实的，很像坎巴拉里面加固没有做好的时候，火箭会晃。不知道他们是把摄影机装在哪里。
And we have confirmation of perigee raise maneuver cutoff. Flight dynamics officer reporting on the loops here in Mission Control Houston that it was a good burn. We are now 54 minutes into the flight. Orion traveling 14,700 miles per hour, and that was the perigee raise maneuver, leaving the lowest part of Orion's orbit around the Earth and putting us right where we want to be for the translunar injection burn. We're looking at that translunar injection burn to happen about 1 hour and 26 minutes after launch, so about 30 minutes from now. That'll be that long burn that helps us break free from the pull of Earth's gravity and commits the spacecraft to a lunar trajectory. So with successful completion of the perigee raise maneuver, I'm going to toss it back to Megan at KSC.
之后才算正式成功。但是 SLS 的任务其实已经完成一大半了。Kraken Attack， 还有，所以又是一个那个坎巴拉玩家是不是？升空还要。 很少有人做这样的内容，对啊，其实。米儿之前也有想过用全英文直播，但是说实话，就这种类型相关的直播，英文已经有非常多的配音了，像 Every Astronaut 跟那个，现在 NASA Space Flight 是一个别的频道，但最大还是 Everyday Astronaut， 所以说，考量到可能还是需要有人做一些中文相关的内容，来这边读冷清就知道了。哎，说实话，就你还是希望。
And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond. 每人希望对航太有兴趣的人能够多起来，然后这样评论区就不那个聊天室就不会那么无聊了。
128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston.
原来那个是跑船的吗？那个你们要不要考虑在船上装那个 Starline 沙林，这样船上就有网络了，应该可以吧？或者是其他那个卫星网络服务的供应商。船上应该是还是有网络的。现在就不要这样了，术业有专攻。他们的台风命名也好，然后声音也比较可爱啊。对于爆肝工程师来说，这一点牺牲是在所难免的。
Now to celebrate Artemis 1's successful liftoff is NASA Administrator Bill Nelson. Administrator, you got to share what you just told Bill and I. You said that was the biggest flame you've ever seen.
多攒几年，祝你能够早日在船上用沙林。
It's the most acoustical shockwave that I had ever experienced. We were out.
真的，希望你之后有办法在船上用网络，这样子一定很酷。
And I'm telling you. You definitely knew that there was some energy being expended.
那好船也要加油哦！各行各业的人都在为了社会做出贡献而努力。应该说为整个世界做出贡献而努力。即使人类终将有一天需要离开地球去探索外太空，地球上的生活也是要顾的。那边是你之前也做过了，其实就。这种东西，毕竟月全食该怎么说？它发生的频率也还算高，至少比日食高，所以其实就随缘。而且说实话 ，Ted， 你最近真的是忙翻了，真的是忙翻了。你们现在是在学，很不幸的是，跟女儿现在是在跟今天这支火箭发射的同一块大陆上的这个地方在学航太，然后希望之后能够成为一名硬体工程师啊。那目前是有很多 project 在跑，所以说。真的快翻过去。
Our Latin emblem is E pluribus unum. In the chamber of the United States Senate, over that main door is E pluribus unum.
但是 Starlink 要进入台湾的话，其实我们都知道的那个东西会是一个很大的影响因素。像毕竟伊隆马斯克之前才对那个开海问题发表过他自己的看法。
And another goal of the Artemis program is to spur economic development. Can you talk to us about how this program has been able to do that for the country?
正在进行中。希望不要跟 SLS 一样跟但是等我先会做好的。
It's billions of dollars affecting
SLS 拖了这么久，你的经商在也拖一段时间是可以的，一定是可以的。
Think of all the indirect.
毕竟从设计是你儿自己想的，然后把它做出来就需要时间。
For example, what you guys are doing on the station, a lot of your research. Take, for example, the pharmaceutical research. You're helping already one drug that's being manufactured on Earth better because of what you learned in space, and that drug is attacking cancer. Now, what's the value of that? That's just additional value that is added.
超大型货柜车，然后后面的大货柜
everybody's pocket, they've got a cell phone, and that's got a camera.
仓库，
And
然后
that's a camera on a chip that came out
应该说
of the NASA
仓库，
space
然
program.
后那个火箭装备跟实验场，还有居住生活舱，然后就开着它到处拍拍照，然后车里面就贴满太阳能板跟那个遥测装置。
What do you think about what we're doing to inspire the Artemis and the generations to follow us?
Well, I think all you have to do is walk into a classroom of kids and look how their eyes get big when you start talking about space. And that is going to multiply itself many-fold as we go back to the moon and then on to Mars. It's also going to bring about a new generation of engineers and mathematicians and technologists and scientists and all the benefits of that additional activity and education coming out of the Artemis generation.
就是为了这一份感动，所以想办法把让自己挤进那个美国 Top 10的 Aerospace Program。虽然是真的很辛苦，但是
couldn't have said it better myself. Administrator, thank you so much for joining us for this momentous occasion. As you said, this is the beginning of a new age in space exploration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
And Kayla, that's going to do it for us here at the host desk. Launch was just the first step in a nearly 26-day mission. Our colleagues in Houston will now continue the broadcast to bring you the next big milestone. From Kayla and me, have a great day and go Artemis 1.
Go Artemis.
我还有 splashdown 的时候，我会再直播一次，然后。
And we had a great ride to orbit today. We are now 1 hour and 2 minutes since we launched the Artemis 1 mission. Orion is traveling with the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, now almost 15,000 miles per hour. We recently saw the perigee raise maneuver. That's where we lifted the lowest point of Orion's orbit around the Earth, and it puts us in the perfect position to prepare us for translunar injection burn coming up in about 25 minutes.
就这样的，他们会持续 update 的任务进度，但是以 X20来看，毕竟很多人应该都知道，米尔是个火箭痴哦，就是非常喜欢的那个，我非常喜欢运载火箭，但是载荷是负责载荷的人需要处理的事情。对，把人类上月球很酷，但是那一整个 capsule。
So again, we are looking forward to that translunar injection burn. That's what it's going to commit us to our journey to the moon. And to tell us a little bit more about the translunar injection burn, we've got Dan Hewitt standing by to show us on the moon board how it's all going to go down.
Hey, thanks, Leah. Everybody, welcome back to the moon board. So, translunar injection, this is the big one. Just a refresher, we're going to be using this, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. This is what's taken over for all of our in-space propulsion maneuvers after that core stage and those boosters have since dropped away. Modified upper stage from the Delta IV family rockets from United Launch Alliance. Hydrogen, oxygen, fueling the RL-10B-2 produces about 24,000 pounds of thrust in a vacuum. Now, the translunar injection is what's going to give us the energy to go from low Earth orbit all the way out here. Now, what does that mean? Here comes a really overly simplified orbital mechanics lesson. Let's say you're in orbit around a planet, say Earth, and you're in a nice circular orbit, but you want to have that orbit be even higher. Well, what you can do is fire your engine behind you, increase your speed, and that then increases the corresponding apogee or the highest point of your orbit on the other side, and that's how you raise it up. Well, if you wanted to make it into a nice circle, you could follow up and do another burn right here, and that would raise your perigee or your lowest point, and then you're in a circular orbit around Earth. That's essentially called the Hohmann transfer. If you've ever followed our missions to the space station, that's what we're doing to kind of gradually raise our orbit until we get to the space station. But for this, we're talking about a lot more energy to get somewhere a lot farther away. So what we're essentially doing is we're going to be in this circular orbit around planet Earth, and we are going to be firing that engine with 24,000 pounds of thrust for about 18 minutes. And what that does is it doesn't just increase your apogee by a little, it increases it all the way out, and it's timed. So by the time Orion is hitting its apogee, the highest point of that orbit, the moon will have moved into position that you're entering into its sphere of influence. You're entering into that area where the lunar gravity is going to be able to capture you. And so that's why we're firing the engine for that long. We need to have that much thrust, that much time to get the energy to go out there. So that's the rough orbital mechanics of what we're doing. Now, after that TLI burn is done, the ICPS is going to separate. Its job largely done in the Artemis 1 mission. As we heard, it's got some secondary payloads up in this stage adapter here that it's going to deploy on its way out. The ICPS will have one more burn after TLI called the disposal burn. And what that's going to do is put it on a trajectory almost looking parallel to that of Orion, where it's going to go around the moon, slingshot away, and then go into what's called a heliocentric orbit. It's actually going to go into orbit around the sun, just like Earth. It's going to leave the Earth-Moon system completely. And then after that, all of the propulsion duties get handed over to the European Service Module. So it'll be using its engines. It's going to do the outbound trajectory correction burn, at least the first one on flight day 1, and a couple more until we get out to the moon and get ready to head into distant retrograde orbit. So that's TLI. It's coming up next. It's going to be a really big moment to pay attention to. So we'll send it back over to Leah to walk us through the ops.
Thanks, Dan. We are 1 hour, 6 minutes, and 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 15,200 miles per hour. Again, we've recently had the perigee raise maneuver, and in less than 20 minutes now, we'll be looking for the translunar injection burn that Dan just showcased that's going to send us to the moon. But our mission started off with an epic show from the Space Launch System.
距离 TLI 还有40分钟，那是一个 long burn， 可是，在40分钟就可以看到它了。但是基本上也是这个是 ground section 的部分的，有点为明天。
Again, the Space Launch System is what carried us into orbit today, launching off at 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time. And we've got a couple of special guests from Marshall Space Flight Center. We have Bruce Tiller, the Solid Rocket Booster Manager, and Johnny Heflin, the RS-25 Engine Manager, to tell us more about the maiden voyage of the rocket. Now, they both got to watch it live at Kennedy Space Center. So a big hi to you, Bruce and Johnny. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes, pleasure to be here.
And can you tell me a little bit about SLS performance today? Did it perform as you expected?
Go ahead, Bruce.
You want me to start?
Go ahead.
Sure. So I managed the booster part of the rocket, and the boosters were fantastic. They performed just as we expected. We got to see some of the data. Obviously, the team hadn't plotted it all, but the pressures looked great. You know, it burned for just the right amount of time, and it separated great. We could see that as well. So very pleased. We were confident it would work well, and it did. Very happy.
Similar story for RS-25. Nominal, what we call nominal performance. The engines performed exactly as predicted based on the quick look data. Like the booster, we've got a lot of data to look at, but so far the data looks really, really good. These historic RS-25s that have 25 flights between them coming off the shuttle program. So really looking forward to getting a look at the data. It looks really good so far.
That's fantastic, and we agree. It was amazing to monitor here. The loops were very quiet in Mission Control Houston. That was a good sign. You knew that things were going well. So we know that the launch abort system was inactive for this mission, but it will be active for when we have crew on board for Artemis 2. Are there any other differences we can expect to see in the rocket for Artemis 2?
So for the boosters, by and large, no. If I talk about the boosters from top to bottom, we are going to make one change, though, because the crew is on it. We're going to have a delay timer in there so that if for some reason they need to abort, we have a few seconds there before, after they abort, before the termination system destroys the rocket. So we will add that, but other than that, nope, these boosters will be the same. Second flight is the first.
Same story for RS-25. It will be the next set of 4 heritage engines from the shuttle program. Configuration-wise, they'll be the same as what we flew today.
Then I'm glad it all went so well. And so after you get that data back from today, what's next for your team?
Well, for my team, we've still got a ton of work to do. We're not only, I mean, we're working on at least 3 flight sets at the same time, and so we've got 2 and 3 and 4 to work on. We also are working on a new booster that's a composite case design that will replace this steel case version that we're flying today. So we're excited about that, and there's a lot of work going on there as well. So we've got a lot to do, and we'll just keep doing it.
RS-25 super busy as well. We have the Artemis 2 engines have already been delivered to MAF, and they're on schedule to be installed in the Artemis 2 core stage in mid-January. We're also about to start the certification test series for the new RS-25 engines that we're building. We have heritage engines for the first 4 flights. Beyond that, coming in on Artemis 5, we will fly what we call the RS-25 restart engines that have been redesigned to reduce cost and reestablish manufacturing for future flights. So we're really excited to get into that certification test series really soon as well.
All right, well, thank you both so much again for joining us. I'm glad that you got to watch the launch, and a major congratulations to you and your teams for all of the effort that you've poured into this. Go Artemis.
Great day.
Great day.
Thank you so much.
好了，现在是中部时
All
间
right, and we are now 1 hour and 12 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1. We are traveling at orbital velocity. Again, Orion is currently attached to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, which recently performed the perigee raise maneuver. And we are standing by for translunar injection burn, now less than 15 minutes away. It's going to be about an 18-minute burn that will commit us to the moon. Part of the Artemis program's goal is to inspire the next generation of dreamers and explorers. So we want to show you what students are doing right now to bring the Artemis missions to life.
再过不到20分钟，它就会进入那个30分钟的injection的状态。它是一个 long burn， 所以先挂着它。
You can design and build technologies that support the Artemis mission with NASA's Artemis Student Challenges.
No matter your background or experience,
you're invited to choose a challenge that interests you, whether it's
rockets,
robots,
tools,
software, vehicles,
or other technologies. There's an exciting challenge for you.
To find a mentor and build a team of students.
Review the rules and requirements, and bring your ideas
to life with NASA's Artemis Student Challenges.
Visit stem.nasa.gov/Artemis and see how you can join one of NASA's mission-related student challenges.
Again, 1 hour and 13 minutes, 30 seconds since liftoff today. We are looking towards translunar injection burn, now about 13 minutes away. That's going to send us to the moon. But did you know that you were invited to fly on the first Artemis mission too? Earlier this year, NASA asked the public to create a pass to virtually board Orion. Anyone who signed up got to include their name on a flash drive. I know my name is on there. And that flash drive is on Orion right now for its journey around the moon. It has more than 3.3 million names. The Orion spacecraft is designed to carry 4 crew members to lunar orbit, which we're preparing for on Artemis 2. NASA astronaut Randy Bresnik brought us through the hatch of the vehicle to show us where those future crew members will live and work during their journey.
This is the Orion crew station, where the crew will be when they fly the vehicle. As you can see, the commander seat's on the left, the pilot seat is on the right. Compared to the space shuttle, which had over 1,200 switches, controls, and circuit breakers, Artemis astronauts will have much less, only about 63. Inside, the crew of 4 can live and work for up to 21 days at a time, which is several days longer than the previous crewed Apollo missions to the moon. The interior is about 30% larger than those Apollo-era capsules to give more crew living and working space. Everything crew needs is packed right under the floor, thanks to the Orion stowage system. Under these panels is space for everything ranging from food, clothing, sleeping bags, to science and camera equipment, and even the tools necessary to perform repairs if required. On the upper part of the crew compartment, or what we call the overhead, is the docking compartment, a crucial component to future exploration. It allows crews to dock the Orion capsule to Gateway, NASA's next generation lunar outpost. Once they dock, crews will have the ability to board the lunar landers also attached to the Gateway and then head down to the surface of the moon. Through these windows, the 4 crew members will have amazing front row seats of their journey to and from the moon. Do you remember Apollo 8 and Bill Anders' famous photo of Earthrise as they came around the moon and saw it for the first time? Imagine being one of those first crew members on Orion, having their own modern-day Earthrise, and knowing they are traveling farther from Earth than humans have ever traveled before. Thanks to thousands of people from across the country and around the world who have helped with the research, design, construction, testing, and more testing. My fellow astronauts and I know that whoever gets selected for future Artemis missions, they're going to have the journey of a lifetime on board the spectacular vehicle we call Orion.
We're now coming up on 10 minutes until the translunar injection burn. Again, Orion is still attached to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. That RL-10 engine is what's going to perform the burn for us. But to hear more about Orion, I'm going to send it back to Dan at the moon board to tell us all about our spacecraft.
Hey, thanks, Leah. Welcome back to the moon board and Orion. So it's still attached to ICPS, still flying on the very upper part of SLS, but pretty soon it's going to be flying free. And after that happens, it's going to take over all of the propulsion, all of the flying, everything for the rest of the mission. And so to talk a little bit more about propulsion, let's focus in on this, the European Service Module. So this is what's going to be doing all of our maneuvers after we're done with ICPS and that translunar injection burn. And it's going to be doing that with a mix of 3 different types of engines. First one here on the bottom is the Large Orbital Maneuvering System engine. This one produces about 6,000 pounds of thrust. That's going to be doing a lot of your really major pushing maneuvers when we get into the powered flybys, the insertion into distant retrograde orbit, the burns to start sending us back home. That's the one that's really applying the most force. It can also gimbal, which essentially means it can swivel around, and that can help your steering. It's helped out by these 8 auxiliary thrusters. They're in pairs. Those are a little bit smaller. Each one of those produces about 105 pounds of thrust each, but they add some additional push to that orbital maneuvering system engine. And then we also have 24 reaction control system thrusters, these smaller ones that you can see all around Orion. Those are used for a lot of attitude control, so again, which they can help which way you're pointing, but also small translational maneuvers, so moving side to side, up, down, those can be called into play. Now, all of those engines share a common fuel source. They're using what are called hypergolic fuels, a mix of a fuel and an oxidizer, in this case monomethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide. Now those are long names and they're hypergolic fuels. What does that mean? A hypergolic fuel essentially means you take your fuel and your oxidizer, you put them together, you get a reaction. You get an exothermic reaction which creates that thrust which comes out. You don't need an ignition source like we have on SLS, which is using oxygen and hydrogen. They're extremely reliable. They're very stable. You don't have to store them at cryogenic temperatures, which is really necessary for smaller spacecraft in orbit because it takes a tremendous amount of electrical energy just to keep fuels that cold. And so we can store them at a much closer to room temperature, essentially, when they're on board this spacecraft. So that's all of the primary propulsion that's going to take over. And again, that's going to be after we get through translunar injection. We're going to be doing correction burns on the way out, a number around the moon as we hang out in distant retrograde orbit for about a week, and then eventually sending us on the way back home. But still attached to ICPS right now, going to detach shortly after that burn is complete. And then Orion will be flying free, the service module pushing it for the rest of the way. So with that, I'll send it back over to Leah as we get closer to that TLI burn.
Thank you, Dan. And yes, indeed, we are looking for TLI coming up in about 7 minutes from now. Again, that's it's a long burn for us, about 18 minutes long. But before we get to that milestone, I have a friend of mine here. It's Stu McClung, the Program Planning and Control Office Chief of Staff for the Orion program. Stu, I am so glad that you could join us today.
Thank you. Good morning. Good to be here.
So how is the spacecraft performing so far, and what's next?
So far so well. Good. We were clean during the pre-launch and ascent. The team's down the hall in the MER taking a look, working everything. It looks good so far, so that's good. And of course, we got the burn couple. After the burn, we'll start ticking through all of our planned events. Like we have a solar, the SAW modal survey. The wings will have a modal survey that we'll do later this morning. One of the first DTOs that we'll take a look at and evaluate how they react.
So DTO, designated test objective. What's another one of those that we'll be looking at over the next 26 days?
Oh, we have probably a good 100 of them. They, culminate from everything from like the modal survey to how the cooling system behaves, common track system. On entry day, one of our major test objectives is looking at how the heat shield and how it handles entry heating.
So how does it feel to be here today and see the future of human space exploration unfold?
It's great. I was doing my shift in the MER earlier today. Haven't slept. The emotion and the adrenaline's got me going. It's great to be a part of this. It's great watching the KSE team execute, and now this is day one for us. We've got 26 days for our team to execute now, and we'll go do our job and set the stage for future Artemis exploration.
And we're excited. We're going to be here along the way for all those major milestones, burns, all the other exciting events that we are looking forward to. So thank you so much for joining us here. We are really excited. A big congrats to you and your team.
Thanks. Let's go have a good burn and let's go to the moon.
Let's do it. We are now less than 5 minutes away from the translunar injection burn. Again, this is the burn that's going to send us around the moon, going to commit us to a lunar trajectory. It is approximately an 18-minute burn. It's a firing of that RL-10 engine on the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. You've got a view here of the White Flight Control Room in Mission Control Houston. This is where all of the teams will be monitoring the mission over the next 26 days. Teams monitored launch tonight. There are, of course, several different shifts that'll be working here. All right, we are coming up now on about 3 minutes until the translunar injection burn. Again, this is about an 18-minute long burn. A firing of the RL-10 engine on the interim cryogenic propulsion stage commits us to lunar trajectory. It helps us break free from the gravitational pull of Earth. In case you missed it, in June of this year, we launched Capstone, a small satellite launched from New Zealand designed to test a unique lunar orbit for our future space station around the moon called Gateway. And just 2 days ago, Capstone arrived at its intended orbit around the moon. So we're very excited for that milestone. It really helps pave the way for our future Artemis missions. We are now 1 hour 20, coming up on 25 minutes since liftoff from Kennedy Space Center today at 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time. We had a really smooth ride to orbit. We saw solid rocket booster jettison as well as launch abort system jettison. Eventually, we had core stage separation, which put us in the configuration that we have now, with Orion connected to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage and flying free. The solar arrays deployed and have been swept back in preparation for the translunar injection burn. Earlier, we had the perigee raise maneuver, which lifted the lowest part of Orion's orbit around the Earth, put us in this perfect positioning ahead of translunar injection burn. A good shot here of our two flight controllers. On the left, you saw Judd Freeling. He is the ascent flight controller. He's been with his team here for the last several hours. And to his right is Rick LeBrode. He's the lead flight controller for a majority of the rest of the mission. Judd's team will take over again once we get back into the re-entry portion. We're now less than a minute away from translunar injection burn. And this is a live view from the spacecraft. Australia towards the Pacific Ocean. This translunar injection burn will begin to take it away from the Earth, breaking it free from the pull of gravity. We're standing by for confirmation that the burn has started. We have confirmation.
Okay, Mira's back.
And from the booster officer that the translunar injection burn has begun and that we are at
现在 on time。现在不知道为什么那个 NASA 直播有点卡，可能是
Australia towards the Pacific Ocean. This translunar injection burn will begin to take it away from the Earth, breaking it free from the pull of gravity. We're standing by for confirmation that the burn has started. We have confirmation from the booster officer that the translunar injection burn has begun and that we are at maximum thrust. Again, this is a long burn, about 18 minutes, 1960s, and it's a proven, reliable engine. This single engine has 25,000 pounds of thrust. We've already seen the ICPS in action today as it powered the perigee, the sun.
不过现在 NASA 直播真的卡，下面不是你的这个网络卡，你可以看一下。
Set of the Earth. This is the closest Orion will be to the Earth.
评论区这边都说超级卡的，有没有？超级卡的，不是米儿这边的问题啊。NASA 那边的直播现在变的满屏的 laggy emoji 跟那个 WT
its return home from the moon. I'm going to keep reporting that number.
真的卡过。
And by the end of the trip from gravity,
suffer
now traveling at 17,000 stage, there are other burns that will take place throughout the mission to direct Orion exactly where we want it to be. Burns will be conducted by using the single main engine.
对，要睡死也是明天的事情。至少我们要见证说，它成功的进入第二整理轨道。那在那之后就不是 SLS 的事情，而是 Orion 的事情了。那。
Coming up on 2.5 minutes into the translunar injection burn. And we're now traveling over 18,000 miles per hour. Again, that speed is going to increase as well. This is really going to push Orion toward the moon. And we are now 252,400 miles away from the moon. And they include the Lunar IceCube, developed by Morehead State University in Kentucky. This will search for all forms of water with an infrared spectrometer. LunaH-Map from Arizona State University will create higher fidelity maps of near-surface hydrogen in craters and other permanently shadowed study the lunar environment. And Luner by Lockheed Martin in Colorado will perform advanced infrared imaging of the lunar surface. Now 3.5 minutes into the translunar injection burn, again it's about an 18-minute burn, traveling 18,560 miles per hour.
的 mock-up 团队就是在做这些培训太空
Quiet
人
on the
的
loops here in mission control as the RL-10 engine continues doing its job on the interim cryogenic propulsion stage.
这几天教授他们的脸色应该会非常的好
We talked about a few of our CubeSats. We also have one preparing to study an asteroid. The Near-Earth Asteroid Scout, or NEA Scout, by Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama will travel by solar sail to a near-Earth asteroid to take pictures of and make other characterizations of its surface. There's a CubeSat on board studying Earth called EQUULEUS by the University of Tokyo, along with JAXA in Japan. EQUULEUS stands for Equilibrium Lunar Earth Point 6U spacecraft and will travel to Lagrange Point 2, imaging Earth's plasmasphere for a better understanding of our planet's radiation environment. We're now coming up on 4 minutes and 45 seconds into the translunar injection burn, Orion traveling at 18,982 miles per hour. Our distance from the moon continues to decrease, now 251,900 miles away. To highlight some more of our CubeSats on board, we also have BioSentinel, developed by Ames Research Center in California, and will use a single yeast cell to detect, measure, and compare the impact of deep space radiation on living organisms over an extended period of time. ArgoMoon was developed by the Italian Space Agency and Argotech in Italy. This CubeSat will observe the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, the stage that it's firing right now, with its advanced optics and software imaging system. And our last CubeSat through the Centennial Challenge is Team Miles from Florida, who developed a CubeSat that will demonstrate propulsion using plasma thrusters and will compete in NASA's Deep Space Derby. These CubeSats pack a ton of tech and science in a tiny package, so they don't all have redundant systems. And if any of the CubeSats missions don't go as planned, it does not affect our primary objectives of Orion's mission. This rideshare opportunity is a rare chance to send CubeSats beyond low Earth orbit, and we're looking forward to seeing what we learn. We're now 6 minutes into the translunar injection burn, Orion traveling at 19,500 miles per hour, being propelled by the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. Still quiet here on the loops in Mission Control Houston. Teams are tracking no issues during the translunar injection burn. Again, this is about an 18-minute burn, so we have approximately 11.5 minutes left. It's also been 1 hour and 33 minutes since liftoff today from Kennedy Space Center. That was a 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time launch. A smooth ride uphill, as we heard from Bruce Tiller and Johnny Heflin working with SLS at Marshall Space Flight Center. And this view from Mission Control Houston, teams continuing to monitor the Artemis 1 mission. This is where they will be around the clock for the next 26 days, all the way until we bring Orion home for a safe splashdown. Coming up on 7.5 minutes until into the translunar injection burn, so less than 11 minutes left in the burn. Orion now traveling at almost 20,000 miles per hour, 251,237 miles away from the moon. Again, that number continuing to shrink. Orion itself is still over Earth. It is over the Pacific Ocean, south of Hawaii. As we've mentioned in today's coverage, multiple countries are represented in Artemis 1 through the SLS, Orion, and European Service Module, as well as the payloads riding along. While NASA is leading the Artemis missions, international partnerships will play a key role in achieving a sustainable presence on the Moon while preparing to send humans to Mars. In 2021, over a dozen countries signed the Artemis Accords, which will establish a common set of principles to govern the civil exploration and use of outer space. The Artemis Accords will create a safe, transparent environment that facilitates exploration, science, and commercial activities for all of humanity. This cooperation not only furthers space exploration, but also enhances peaceful relationships between countries on Earth. We're now over 9 minutes into the translunar injection burn, an 18-minute burn, so we have about 9 minutes left. We're about halfway through. The RL-10 engine continues to fire at
真的可惜
maximum
不能看
thrust.
到像 Vulcan 那第2集上一集那样子有色画面。
Orion traveling attached to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage now
那
over
应该是另外一番景象，
20,600
因为我
miles
们
per
这样
hour.
看到的那个 SpaceX 的发射直播，它那个 Merlin Vacuum 就是上面级的梅林真空机，真空版梅林，它用的是那个液氧煤油，所以它的尾焰是很明显的，就红色加上一定程度的积碳。但是 RL10是氢氧机，所以说它的尾焰应该会干净又漂亮。真的很想从那个摄影机的那个视角看看。
It's been 1 hour and 37 minutes since we launched today. Again, that was 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time from Kennedy Space Center. Orion is still attached to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. This is the last burn for the interim cryogenic propulsion stage while attached to Orion. It will also have a disposal burn later on. About 10 minutes after we have ICPS cut off, Orion will separate from the interim cryogenic propulsion stage itself, and the capsule will be flying free, still attached to the European Service Module. We've got about 7 minutes left in the translunar injection burn. Orion traveling now at over 21,000 miles per hour. The RL-10 engine continues to fire on the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, powering the translunar injection burn. This is the second firing of the ICPS today. The first we saw was the perigee raise maneuver, which lifted the lowest point of Orion's orbit around the Earth and put it in the proper positioning for this burn. This is the burn that commits us to the Moon. We're now over 12 minutes into this burn. Again, it's about an 18-minute burn, so less than 6 minutes left, and 1 hour 39 minutes since we launched. Orion and the ICPS now traveling at over 21,400 miles per hour. And as I promised, we continue to grow closer to the Moon, now 249,000 miles away. Now over 13 minutes into the translunar injection burn, putting us less than 5 minutes away from cutoff. We have had a nominal burn so far. That RL-10 engine continues to fire at maximum thrust, 25,000 pounds of thrust. We're now traveling over 21,730 miles per hour. And we've just heard the call for priority 1, meaning we have reached the point at which we could return at lunar return or similar speeds, testing the heat shield as required ahead of flight for Artemis 2. Now over 14 minutes into the translunar injection burn, less than 4 minutes until cutoff, traveling now at over 21,900 miles per hour.
这会是一个漫长的机动，距离那个 TLI 还是 OTI 结束还有大约6分钟。
Now less than 3 minutes away from cutoff of the interim cryogenic propulsion stage and coming up on 1 hour and 42 minutes into the Artemis 1 mission. The RL-10 engine on the interim cryogenic propulsion stage continues to fire as planned at maximum thrust. Again, this is about an 18-minute burn. That's about twice as long as the ride to orbit today, so that just shows how much power we need to break free from the pull of Earth and take us to the moon. "16 minutes now into the translunar injection burn, Orion traveling at over 22,276 miles per hour. About a minute and a half now until cutoff of the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. Again, this being an 18-minute burn. We are now 248,280 miles away from the moon and continuing to grow closer. 605 miles away from Earth and continuing to increase that distance. Less than a minute now until cutoff of the IceCube and the end of the translunar injection burn. We've had a good burn all the way through so far. And 1 hour, 44 minutes since launch today. And we have cutoff of the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, which has committed Orion to the trans-lunar conjunction. The spacecraft is moon-bound. Orion is now traveling at 22,500 miles per hour, 247,450 miles away from Earth. Now that the interim cryogenic propulsion stage has completed its translunar injection burn, it is no longer needed to propel us to the moon. It's done its job and it will separate from Orion. After it separates, those 10 CubeSats we discussed will be deployed from the Orion stage adapter, which is below the service module and above the ICPS. Each payload will be ejected with a spring mechanism from dispensers installed on the Orion stage adapter. And again, these will help us study the moon and space weather, test innovative propulsion technologies, analyze the effects of radiation on organisms, and provide high-resolution imagery of the Earth and moon. The CubeSat deploys will start just short of about 4 hours after launch. Once those CubeSats are deployed, the ICPS will be on track for disposal in a heliocentric orbit, meaning it will closely circle the sun until destroyed. The next change we'll see is for the ICPS to separate from Orion and the service module. Those will continue flying free on their journey toward the moon.
要下定完成了，是要等那个 separation 第2级跟 Orion 分离之后 ，SLS 的任务就算正式完成了。当然还有那个立方卫星的 deployment， 但是那个已经是次要任务了。
It's now been an hour, 47 minutes, and 30 seconds into the first flight of the Artemis program. Orion now traveling 21,860 miles per hour, 1,129 miles away from Earth. That stage separation from the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, again, should be about 10 minutes after the translunar injection burn is complete, so approximately 7 minutes from now. Shortly after ICPS separation, Orion's service module will fire its auxiliary thrusters to move the spacecraft a safe distance away from the expended stage. Orion continues on an outbound path to the moon, and the Orion stage adapter attached to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will deliver several small payloads over several deployments. We're now over 1 hour, 51 minutes since launch today from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Orion is traveling attached to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, but not for much longer. We look for that separation to happen in about 5 minutes. At that point, Orion will still be flying attached to the service module, and in this animation, you can see the service module directly below the capsule. Those solar array wings are deployed. The spacecraft now traveling over 20,570 miles per hour, continuing to increase its distance from Earth, now over 1,780 miles away, continuing to decrease its distance from the Moon, 245,150 miles away. Hearing confirmation from teams here in Mission Control Houston that the solar arrays are in their proper configuration for interim cryogenic propulsion stage separation. Again, we just saw the translunar injection burn, a successful approximately 18-minute burn that has helped Orion break free from the pull of Earth's gravity and sending us toward the Moon. We're now standing by for separation from that stage now that it has done its job for Orion. However, it still has a job to do. It will help eject some CubeSats that will help us study the Moon, Earth, and the space environment. Orion now traveling at 19,700 miles per hour, 2,270 miles away from Earth. We're expecting that stage separation to happen in about a minute. As you can see, we have confirmation of interim cryogenic propulsion stage from Orion. With the Earth in the background and the Moon is our destination, Artemis generation, we are going.
第二级已经分离了，现在 Orion 跟服务舱是属于 coating 的状态。到这里 ，SLS 的任务端正是完成了。 可惜我们没有办法看到外部拍的那个照片。如果那个upper stage 上面有装摄影机就好了。但是就到我这边 SLS 就算成功的完成了它的大任务。现在是凌晨1点45分， 我们先把原本的画面切回来吧。OK， 像之前米儿说的那个，我们等到那个 Orion Splashdown 的时候再见吧。那个不管怎么说，就像刚才那个致辞的时候说的 ，The higher you climb, the better the view is。我有点忘记原话是不是这样子，可能会差几个字。就虽然考虑到时间点，今天的这个聊天室其实有点冷清，但是很高兴，就是大家跟米儿一起见证这个又一个太空探索的里程碑，也希望之后这个世界能够越来越好。毕竟我们在地球上先过得好，才能够一起探索宇宙嘛。好，那今天的直播就先到这个地方，非常感谢大家今天多空来观看，也来庆祝这个航太界的大事。那就这样子，大家 Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and have a nice day. Goodbye.